Hi guys. Tonight we step softly into a world so old that even the stars seem closer to the ground. You're standing near the edge of a quiet ancient camp, where a small fire breathes orange light into the dark, and beyond it the Ice Age wind moves through dry grass with a low, patient whisper. The air smells of smoke, cold stone, animal hide and earth after a hard day of walking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you are watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere out there, someone else is drifting through the same old darkness with you. Now, dim the lights and let your eyes adjust to this older night. A night before cities, farms, written names, or anyone complaining about slow internet, which would have seemed like sorcery and probably still a little annoying. You take a careful step across the ground. It is firm beneath your feet, packed by many souls, human and animal alike. The world around you is not empty, though at first it may feel that way. There are no roads, no roofs, no lamps in windows, but there are paths made by memory. There are shelters made from branches, hide, and patience. There are people nearby, sitting close to warmth, speaking softly in a language you cannot understand, though the rhythm feels familiar at the end of a long day. This is roughly 70,000 years ago, although even that number is a gentle approximation, a marker placed by modern minds on a past that did not know it was ancient. Earth is in the late Pleistocene, a time of shifting climates, colder seasons, and wider grasslands. Sea levels are lower than they are today because so much water is held in ice. Great animals move across the landscape, some graceful, some heavy, and some best admired from a respectful distance, which is also good advice for many modern meetings. The people you are watching are Homo sapiens. That is the mainstream fact beneath the firelight. By this time, our species has already existed for a long while in Africa, and small groups have learned to survive in many environments. They make stone tools, they know where water gathers after rain, they know which plants can feed them, which can heal, and which are better left alone unless one enjoys a dramatic evening. They share food, they care for children, they carry knowledge in memory, gesture, and voice. Yet this moment still bothers scientists in the most fascinating way. Around this broad period, something seems to change, not all at once, but gradually, unevenly, and mysteriously. Archaeologists find signs that human behavior becomes more flexible and symbolic in different places. Tools become more varied, ornaments appear, pigments are used. People begin leaving behind traces that feel less like simple survival and more like meaning. Researchers continue to question why. Was there a change in the human brain? Was language becoming richer? Was climate pressure forcing people to adapt or vanish? Was it growing social networks, where ideas could travel farther than any one person? Or is the whole idea of a sudden leap too neat, too modern, too eager to turn a messy human story into a clean chapter heading? You look toward the fire again. Sparks lift into the dark and disappear. A child leans against an older woman wrapped in the hide. The surface worn smooth from years of use. Someone works a stone flake in careful silence, tapping, turning, listening for the tiny sound that tells the hand where the next chip may fall. Another person rubs red pigment between fingers, staining the skin in a colour that will linger after the night has passed. The pigment may be ochre, a natural iron-rich earth used by ancient humans in many parts of the world. And here is a quieter, quirkier tidbit. Some pieces of ochre found at prehistoric sites appear to have been scraped or ground in ways that suggest people may have cared not just about usefulness, but about colour and texture. Humanity, it seems, may have been fussing over presentation for a very long time. The wind moves again, cool against your face. It carries the smell of grass, ash, and something roasting near the coals. Food is not abundant here. It is earned by walking, watching, remembering, and cooperating. A meal may be shared in small portions, nothing is wasted if it can be chewed, cracked, dried, sharpened, tied, burned, worn or tucked away for later. In a modern kitchen, leftovers might wait sadly in a plastic container until someone feels guilty enough to eat them. Here, there is no such luxury. You notice the camp is not random. People sit where the smoke drifts least. Tools are kept near hands that know how to use them. Children stay near the centre, where warmth and watchful eyes are strongest. These people may not have writing, metal, or pottery, but they are skilled, observant, social, and deeply adapted. Scholars remain divided on how best to describe this period. Some call it a behavioural revolution. Others prefer a slower model, where abilities built over thousands of years and appear differently from place to place. Are you standing at the edge of a sudden awakening, or are you witnessing one quiet moment in a much longer unfolding? The fire gives a soft crack. Someone laughs under their breath. It's not a grand sound. It is small, human, almost private. And somehow that small laugh reaches across the deep gulf of time more easily than any fossil. It reminds you that evolution is not only bones and dates, it is also the warmth of bodies huddled together, the relief of finding water, and the comfort of a familiar voice in the dark. Above you, the sky is immense, without city lights. The stars are not decoration, they are a presence. Perhaps these people notice certain lights returning with certain seasons. You cannot know for sure. And that uncertainty is part of the wonder. In the distance, an animal calls. The camp quiets for a moment. Heads turn, no one panics. They listen, measure, wait. The sound fades. The fire continues. A baby sighs in sleep. A stone tool is set down. A piece of hide is pulled tighter around tired shoulders. Life goes on, not dramatically, but carefully. And as you stand there, wrapped in the soft edge of ancient firelight, you begin to feel the central mystery of this journey. Something in these people will help their descendants cross continents, paint caves, bury the dead with care, invent myths, shape music, build villages, and eventually wonder, from warm beds in the glow of late-night screens, what happened around 70,000 years ago. The answer is scattered in stone flakes, pigments, beads, bones, climates, genes, and the spaces between them. So you breathe slowly, you let the smoke drift upward, you let the old night open around you, and you begin walking gently into the puzzle. You move away from the first small circle of firelight, not leaving it behind exactly, but letting it become one warm point in a vast and breathing dark. The ground slopes gently beneath you, and your feet find a narrow path between stones and dry grasses, somewhere behind you. The camp murmurs in low voices. Somewhere ahead, the night opens into a wider landscape, where the past has no signposts and no polite little museum labels explaining what everything means. This is the puzzle of 70,000 years ago. Not one single year, of course. As if someone in a fur wrap stood up on a chilly Tuesday and announced that human evolution would now become mysterious. History is rarely that tidy. It is a broad window of time stretched across many generations, in which scientists notice patterns that seem important, but not simple, around this era, especially between roughly 100,000 and 50,000 years ago. Evidence begins to suggest changes in human behaviour, movement, technology, and imagination. The dates are debated, the evidence is uneven, and the story refuses to sit quietly in one neat explanation. Before you go deeper, it helps to understand the world these people live in. There are no nations, no borders, no written calendars, no permanent towns with little committees arguing about where to put the well. Human groups are small. They move through landscapes according to seasons, animal migrations, rainfall, plant growth, and memory. Their technology is made from stone, bone, wood, fibre, hide, shell and fire. Their economy, if we can use such a modern word, is based on gathering, hunting, sharing, repairing, and knowing when to move on. A mainstream historical fact, quiet but important, is that Homo sapiens were not alone in the world at this time. Other human relatives still existed, including Neanderthals in parts of Europe and Western Asia, and Denisovans somewhere across Asia. Your species is one branch among several, not yet the only humankind left beneath the stars. That thought can feel strange. Today, the word human usually means one species. Here, in the deep past, humanity is more like a family of nearby fires, some visible, some hidden beyond the ridge, and beyond. You walk through cool air scented with dust and distant water. Low shrubs brush against your legs. The stars are bright enough to turn the horizon into a dark cutout. A nightbird gives a soft call, and for a while, the sound is the only thing moving. Modern scientists look back at this period through fragments. A chipped stone, a pierced shell, a hearth stain, a piece of bone, a tooth in a cave floor, a trace of ancient DNA, recovered with astonishing care from remains that survived by luck more than courtesy. These fragments are small, and yet people build enormous questions around them. When did humans begin thinking like us? When did language become complex? When did art, ritual, long-distance trade, and deeper planning become ordinary parts of life? Researchers continue to question whether there was ever a true sudden leap. Some argue for what has often been called a cognitive revolution, a meaningful shift in mental ability or communication that allowed Homo sapiens to cooperate in larger, more flexible ways. Others disagree, suggesting that human abilities developed gradually over a much longer span, with earlier roots in Africa and later bursts of expression when conditions allowed. In other words, one camp sees a doorway, another sees a long path, and the evidence, being ancient and somewhat unhelpful, smiles softly and refuses to choose. You pause near a shallow stream. The water moves quietly over rounded stones, reflecting pieces of starlight. You kneel and touch it. It is cold enough to tighten your fingers. Around this stream, a group might stop at dawn to drink, fill skins, search for tracks, or gather plants. The ordinary details matter because evolution is not only a grand idea, it is thirst, hunger, cold hands, tired knees, and the need to remember which valley has berries after rain. One lesser-known tidbit sits beautifully in this mystery. Some of the oldest known shell beads, found in places such as North Africa and the Near East, may be more than 100,000 years old. These tiny objects suggest that symbolic behaviour did not simply appear in one grand moment around 70,000 years ago. People may have been making and wearing meaningful objects earlier than the old sudden revolution story allowed. A bead is small, almost laughably small compared with a mammoth, a glacier, or a migration across continents, but it can carry identity. It can say, in its quiet way, I belong, I remember, I am seen. You continue along the stream. The bank is soft in places, and your steps leave faint marks that will vanish with the next rain. That is one reason prehistory is so difficult to understand. Most lives leave no trace. A joke told beside a fire, a lesson whispered to a child, a promise made during a storm, a grief held in silence. All of it disappears unless it touches stone, bone, pigment, shell, or something else stubborn enough to endure. So scientists ask cautious questions. Did climate pressure push groups into new lands? Did population growth make innovation easier because more minds were connected? Did language allow people to share plans, stories, and warnings with greater precision? Did symbolic thought help strangers trust one another, or were all these forces tangled together, like fibres twisted into cord? You look at your own hands in the dim light. They are not so different from the hands that shaped flakes, tied knots, scraped hides, lifted children, and painted skin. The body was already recognisably human. Yet the mystery is not simply what bodies could do, it is what minds shared. A small gust passes over the stream, carrying the smell of damp clay and crushed plants. You imagine a group moving here at first light. One person studies tracks near the water, another carries a bundle of gathered roots, someone checks a stone blade. Running a thumb carefully along the edge, a child asks a question, and an adult answers with a gesture toward the hillside. Perhaps there are words for yesterday and tomorrow, for danger and hunger, for kinship and memory. Perhaps there are stories explaining why the stars move or why certain animals must be treated with care. You cannot hear them clearly, and maybe that is fitting. The past does not shout, it breathes. In the modern world, we like explanations that fit in one sentence, preferably with a dramatic title and a helpful thumbnail. But deep history is softer and stranger than that. Around 70,000 years ago, something did change, or perhaps many somethings converged. Humans moved farther, their tools diversified, their social worlds may have expanded, their symbols became more visible in the archaeological record. Yet each clue opens another question. The stream bends into darkness. Behind you, the campfire has become a tiny glow. Ahead, the old world waits, patient and immense. You follow the water, listening to its steady murmur, and you understand that this chapter is not a solved case, it is an invitation. You are walking through a mystery written not in books, but in earth, bone, ash, and silence. You follow the stream until its quiet voice thins into the wider hush of morning. The sky is not yet bright, but the dark has softened. A pale grey light gathers along the horizon, and the cold of the night lingers close to the ground. Grass brushes your ankles, damp with dew. Somewhere nearby, a small animal rustles beneath scrub, then freezes, hoping the world will forget it exists. A very old strategy, and honestly, sometimes, it's not the bad one. You are moving now through life before great innovation, or at least before the kinds of innovation that modern eyes easily recognise. This does not mean life is simple. That is one of the first mistakes people make when they imagine the deep past. A stone tool is not simple to the person who must choose the right rock, strike it at the right angle, repair it, carry it, and use it without wasting precious effort. A camp is not simple when everyone's survival depends on memory, timing, trust, and the weather behaving itself, which it rarely does for anyone. The historical background here is a world without farming, herding, pottery, metal, wheels, or permanent villages. People live by hunting, gathering, fishing where possible, scavenging when useful, and moving through familiar territories. Their lives follow seasons rather than clocks. A valley may be good in spring when plants return, a ridge may be useful in autumn when animals pass below it. A waterhole may save lives in a dry season. Knowledge is stored not in books or phones or helpful little calendar alerts, but in minds, bodies, stories, and repeated practice. A mainstream fact to carry with you is that early Homo sapiens used prepared coarse stone technologies long before cities or agriculture. In parts of Africa and beyond, people made flakes from carefully shaped stone cores, planning several steps ahead before the final useful piece came free. The tool may fit into the palm, the thinking behind it may stretch across years of learning. You step into a camp at dawn. It is smaller than you might expect, but it has structure. A fire pit rests in the centre, its coals hidden under ash, still breathing faint warmth. Around it lie traces of sleep-flattened grass, folded hides, a few stones set to hold something in place. The smell is intimate and earthy. Smoke caught in fur, old ash, dried plants, and human bodies waking slowly in the cold. Someone stirs the coals with a stick. A thin thread of smoke rises, grey and soft, then thickens as dry grass catches. The first flame is tiny, almost shy. People shift closer. A child rubs their eyes. An older man coughs once into his hand and adjusts a hide around his shoulders. Nobody is rushing. There is no alarm clock performing its little act of cruelty, but the day has demands, and everyone seems to feel them. You notice hands at work, or one person scrapes a hide stretched across a smooth piece of wood. Another checks a bundle of plant fibres, twisting them into cord. Someone sorts stone flakes by size and edge. A woman examines a cracked bone, perhaps for marrow, perhaps for shaping into a tool. The morning is quiet, but not idle. It has the gentle concentration of people who understand that comfort is made in small tasks. A quirky and lesser-known tidbit sits among these ordinary motions. Archaeologists have found evidence that prehistoric people sometimes used adhesives made from natural materials, including plant resins and ochre mixtures, to huff stone points onto handles. Imagine that, not just a sharp rock, but a composite tool, a little prehistoric engineering project, complete with sticky substances and probably at least one person silently judging someone else's technique. The air warms slightly as the sun rises. Light catches on the rough surface of stone scattered near the hearth. You pick one up in your imagination and feel its weight. It is cool, hard and full of possibility. To modern hands, it may look like debris. To someone here, it is a blade, a scraper, a point, a repair waiting to happen. This difference matters. Archaeology often begins with learning to see intention where an untrained eye sees only broken rock. Scholars remain divided on how quickly innovation accelerated in this period. Some suggest that the increase in complex tools and symbolic objects reflects a major cognitive change. Others argue that the abilities were already present earlier. But population size, environment, and social contact determined when they became visible. In a small isolated group, a clever invention might vanish if its maker dies or moves away. In a larger connected network, the same idea can travel, improve, and survive. You might think of it as an ancient version of sharing a useful tip. Except instead of a cooking hack online, it is how to keep your spearhead attached and not have a deeply embarrassing hunting afternoon. You walk toward the edge of camp, where several people prepare to leave. They carry little by the modern standards, but everything matters. A skin bag, a few stone flakes, a digging stick polished by use, cordage, perhaps dried food, perhaps pigment, perhaps a shell or bead worn close to the body. The things they carry are not random possessions. They are survival, memory, and identity. The landscape beyond camp is open and patient. Patches of grassland stretch toward darker clusters of trees. The morning air smells of damp soil and crushed leaves. In the distance, animals graze, their backs moving like low shadows in the light. A hunting party will need knowledge more than bravery. They must read tracks, wind direction, animal behavior, and each other's signals. The dramatic leap, the final chase, is only one brief part of a much longer chain of planning. Back at camp, those who remain gather roots, tend fire, repair clothing, watch children, and prepare food. Daily life is not divided into neat modern categories. Work, learning, childcare, storytelling, tool-making, and social bonding fold into one another. A child watching someone strike stone is also learning patience. A shared meal is also a lesson in trust. A story told at dusk may preserve a route, a danger, or a memory of a place where water once stood. You sit near the rekindled fire. The warmth touches your knees. Smoke leans sideways in the breeze. A piece of wood pops softly, and ash settles like pale dust. You hear the faint scrape of stone against hide, the murmur of voices, the breathing of someone still half asleep. It is peaceful for the moment, but not easy. Comfort here is fragile. It must be made again each day. And as you watch, The idea of before innovation begins to loosen. These people are not waiting for history to begin. They're already living inside intelligence, adaptation, memory, and care. Their world has no grand monuments, but it has skills so refined that most of us would struggle to survive 1 week without them. Today, we might tap a screen to find food, weather, directions, and entertainment. Here, all of that must live in the body and the group. The sun rises higher, the camp becomes clearer, footprints cross over older footprints, smoke rises into blue morning. Someone laughs softly as a child drops a bundle of twigs and looks personally betrayed by gravity. The day opens. You walk onward through the ordinary brilliance of ancient life, where every small act carries the quiet weight of survival. You leave the waking camp behind, carrying with you the soft scrape of stone, the smell of smoke, and the small laugh of the child betrayed by gravity. The morning has opened fully now. Pale sunlight stretches across the land, turning dry grass silver at the tips. The air is still cool, but warmth begins to gather on stones and bare earth. You walk slowly, because this is not a place that rewards hurry. The ancient world asks you to notice. Ahead, a low ridge rises against the sky. It is not dramatic, not the sort of place that would attract a crowd with cameras and snacks, but it gives a view over the surrounding country. Small trees cling to the slope, their leaves move in a light breeze, making a soft, papery sound. Somewhere below, people are moving through the morning, following old paths known by scent, sight, memory, and habit. This section of your journey brings you toward one of the deepest questions in human evolution. When did the human mind begin to bloom in ways we would recognize, not merely to survive, because many creatures survive beautifully, not merely to use tools, because other animals do that too, but to imagine, plan, symbolize, teach, remember distant places, and perhaps speak of things not present. A waterhole beyond the hill, a hunt that failed last season, a person who died but still matters, a spirit, maybe, a warning, maybe, a joke, almost certainly, because humanity without teasing feels unlikely. The historical background is important here. Long before 70,000 years ago, humans and earlier relatives had already mastered fire, stone tools, movement across difficult landscapes, and social life. They were not blank creatures waiting for inspiration to arrive like a delivery package. But around this broad era, archaeologists begin to see richer signs of flexible behaviour. These signs do not appear everywhere at once. They flicker in scattered places, like little fires across a dark plain. A mainstream fact is that by the Middle Stone Age in Africa, Homo sapiens were making increasingly varied tools and using materials in planned ways. Some sites show evidence of carefully prepared points, long-distance movement of stone, and the use of pigments. These things suggest planning, teaching, and shared knowledge. The mind behind them is not simply reacting to the world, it is arranging the world. You climb the ridge and pause near a shallow overhang in the rock. The stone above you is rough and cool, shaded from the morning sun. Dust lies in the cracks. A faint smell of mineral earth hangs in the air. You imagine people stopping here for a short rest. Perhaps during a long walk between water sources, someone may sit with their back to the wall, rubbing pigment on stone. Someone else may examine a point, test its balance, and decide whether it is worth carrying farther. Here, creativity is not separate from survival. A tool must cut, but it can also reflect a tradition. A bead may decorate, but it may also identify a group. A story may comfort a child, but it may also encode where not to cross a river during floods. We often treat imagination as a luxury, something for quiet weekends, art supplies, and people with nice notebooks, but in the deep past, imagination may have been a survival tool. To imagine tomorrow is to prepare for it. To imagine another person's thoughts is to cooperate with them. To imagine danger before it arrives is, frankly, very convenient. Researchers continue to disagree about what triggered this apparent blossoming. Some believe that genetic or neurological changes may have made symbolic thought and complex language more powerful. Others suggest the human brain was already capable, and the real difference came from larger populations and stronger social networks. More people meant more ideas, and more connections meant those ideas could be preserved. A clever knot, a sharper point, a better route, a meaningful sign, all could pass from hand to hand and mind to mind. You sit beneath the overhang and listen. The breeze moves over the ridge. Insects click in the grass, far below. A bird lifts from a bush and darts away, its wings catching light for one brief second. The world seems quiet, but it is full of information. Every sound means something, every track might matter. Every cloud might warn of weather. To live here is to interpret constantly. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit appears when you think of early pigments. At some prehistoric sites, pieces of ochre show grinding marks, scraping, and sometimes deliberate shaping, as if people carried and processed these coloured stones with care. Ochre could have been used for hide preparation, insect protection, body painting, decoration, or ritual. It might have been practical, symbolic, or both. Ancient people did not have to choose between useful and meaningful. Modern people paint their walls, choose phone cases, and pretend mugs with inspirational quotes and necessary equipment. So perhaps we should not be shocked if early humans also liked things to carry colour. Identity and a little flair. The overhang darkens toward the back, where the air is cooler. You run your fingers near the stone wall without touching it, feeling the chill that lingers there at later sites in human history. Cave art will reveal animals, signs, handprints, and shapes full of mystery around this earlier period. The evidence is less abundant, more scattered, and more debated, yet the roots of that later explosion may already be growing. Some scholars suggest that symbolic life emerged gradually through practices like ornament use, pigment use, burial customs, and repeated marks. Others caution that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Wood, fibre, skin, feathers, and painted bodies decay. Songs vanish. Stories leave no fossil. A person could have lived in a world of rich symbols and left behind only a broken flake. You stand again and continue over the ridge. On the far side, the land dips into a shallow basin where water sometimes gathers. The soil is darker there. Animal tracks cross in overlapping lines hooves. Paws, perhaps human feet. You imagine a group approaching this place cautiously. They've been here before. They know which animals come at dusk. They know where to wait, where to hide, where the wind betrays scent. Planning is visible in their movements, no one needs to announce it. A young hunter studies the ground. An older woman points to a set of tracks and says something brief. The others listen. Perhaps the words describe size, direction, freshness, risk. Perhaps a gesture adds what words do not. Their communication is layered. Their attention is shared. In that shared attention, you sense something profoundly human, and you might wonder, as the basin brightens under the sun, whether the bloom of the mind was really a sudden flower at all. Perhaps it was more like dawn. Long before the sun appears, the dark begins to change, edges soften, shapes emerge, birds wake, then, only after a long preparation. Light spills across the land and everyone agrees that morning has arrived. So you walk through this ancient morning with a quieter understanding. The mystery is not whether these people were intelligent. They were. The mystery is how their intelligence became so portable, so social, so symbolic, and so powerful that it reshaped the planet, beneath the sky, among stone, pigment, memory, and breath. You are watching the slow brightening of the human mind. You follow the shallow basin until the sun begins its slow descent, and the world changes its colour again. Afternoon light turns the grass honey gold. Shadows lengthen under the scattered trees. The heat of the day loosens its grip, and a cooler breath rises from the ground. Somewhere behind you, a bird calls once, then again, as if reminding everyone that evening has its own schedule and will not be delayed for human convenience. You're returning toward fire. That is where this part of the journey belongs, not because fire is new to these people, but because fire gathers life into a circle. Long before 70,000 years ago, human ancestors were using fire in different ways, and by this period, fire is already woven into survival. It warms bodies, protects against some animals, transforms food, hardens wooden points, gives light after sunset, and turns a patch of dangerous darkness into something almost like a room. Not a room with walls, of course, more like a room made of glow, smoke, and shared attention. The historical background is a world where night is not simply the absence of daylight, it is a powerful condition. Without electric lamps, the dark is thick and physical. It hides predators, cools the air, covers tracks, and changes how far people can safely move. So when a fire is kindled, it does more than burn wood. It creates time, it extends the day, it allows hands to keep working, faces to be seen, stories to be told, and plans to be made while the stars rise overhead. A mainstream fact is that fire use shaped human life in deep ways. Cooking made many foods easier to chew and digest, and hearths became centres of activity where tools could be made, food prepared, warmth shared, and social bonds strengthened. You can think of the hearth as one of humanity's oldest gathering places. Before town squares, temples, kitchens, cafes, and the mysterious modern habit of everyone staring into a fridge, there was the fire. You reach the edge of a camp at dusk. The people here are settling into evening. A few return from foraging with roots, fruits, or gathered plants wrapped in leaves or hide. Others carry wood. The dry branches knock softly against one another. Someone kneels at the hearth, coaxing a hidden ember with grass and breath. Smoke lifts first, then a small flame leans sideways, orange and blue at its base. The smell of it arrives before the warmth does sharp smoke. Dry grass, resin from a twig, and the faint sweetness of something cooking near the coals. You sit close enough to feel heat against your shins. The ground beneath you is cool now, and the contrast is comforting. Across the fire, faces appear and disappear as the flames move. Eyes catch light, hands gesture. A child leans forward, fascinated by sparks, and an adult gently pulls them back with the universal expression of someone who has said this before. Some parts of parenting may be truly ancient. Here, around the fire, you begin to sense why language matters so much in the puzzle of human evolution. Tools can cut, fire can warm, but words, gestures, and shared meanings allow knowledge to travel without being physically carried. Someone can explain a route beyond the hill. Someone can describe an animal not yet seen. Someone can warn of a place where the ground turns soft after rain. Someone can remember the dead, praise the brave, tease the lazy, soothe the frightened, or tell a child why certain stars appear when the air grows cold. Researchers remain divided over when human language became fully modern. Spoken language leaves no fossil, which is frankly inconsiderate of it. The bones of the throat, the shape of the skull, the genes involved in speech, and the complexity of tools all offer clues. But no single clue answers the question. Some scientists argue that complex language may have been present well before 70,000 years ago. Others suggest that changes in social life and symbolic thought made language more powerful during this broad period. The debate continues because language is not only anatomy, it is culture, memory, sound, trustes, and practice. The fire crackles softly. A log collapses inward, sending sparks upward into the deepening blue of evening. No one startles. The sound becomes part of the rhythm. Someone speaks in a low voice, and others listen. You cannot translate the words, but you understand the shape of attention. Heads tilt, a few people glance toward the dark beyond camp. A hand traces a line in dust, perhaps showing a path, a river bend, or the movement of animals. Another hand taps the ground twice, a quiet answer follows. A lesser-known historical tidbit fits neatly here. Some researchers have suggested that controlled firelight may have created a special setting for storytelling and social learning. In the soft flicker of flames, faces become expressive, shadows move, and ordinary speech can turn into performance. We do not know exactly what early humans said beside their fires, but we can imagine that evening offered a rare space for memory to become shared. And if you have ever watched people become suddenly more honest and philosophical around a campfire, you may suspect this habit has very old roots. You listen as the group settles. Food is passed from hand to hand. It may be roasted meat, softened roots, or marrow cracked from bone. The smells are rich and grounding. Fat warms near the coals. Smoke clings to hide clothing. Ash dusts the fingers. A child chews slowly, fighting sleep, determined to remain part of the adult world for at least a few more heroic minutes. The firelight reveals small details: a cord tied around a wrist, a stone flake tucked near a knee, a patch of red pigment on someone's skin, a scar at the edge of a hand. These are not museum pieces. They are parts of life. People speak, listen, interrupt gently, and fall quiet again. Perhaps a story begins, and perhaps it has been told many times. Maybe it explains where the group came from. Maybe it teaches caution. Maybe it makes everyone laugh at a hunter who once slipped into mud at exactly the wrong moment. Survival is serious, yes, but no society survives on seriousness alone. Even in the Pleistocene, someone probably had excellent comic timing. As night deepens, the fire becomes the center of the visible world beyond it. Darkness presses close, the stars brighten. A distant animal calls, and the camp pauses to listen. After a moment, the voices resume, softer now. You feel how cooperation is warmed by repetition. The same faces, the same fire, the same shared meal. The same stories shaped and reshaped until they become memory sturdy enough to carry, and you understand that language. Whether spoken in words, signs, gestures, rhythm, or expression, may have been one of humanity's quiet miracles. Not loud, not sudden, not carved in some stone, just breath moving through the night, turning experience into knowledge and knowledge into belonging. The flames settle lower. Ash glows red beneath blackened wood. One by one, people shift into sleep. Someone remains awake, watching the darkness. Someone else murmurs a final phrase to a child. You sit in the soft warmth, listening to the last small sounds of the camp, and the ancient fire seems to whisper that before humans built cities, they built circles of light where voices could endure. You remain near the low fire as the night grows quieter, and the camp settles into the soft breathing rhythm of sleep. The flames have lowered now, no longer bright enough to push the darkness far away. Instead, they glow gently beneath ash, pulsing red whenever the wind slips through the grass. The smell of smoke is woven into everything the hides, the hair, the ground, even the cool air that moves around your face. A few people are still awake. One sits close to the coals with a small object in hand. Another watches the edge of camp, listening to the dark beyond the firelight. The child who fought sleep earlier has finally lost the battle, curled under a hide with one hand open beside their cheek. A tiny victory for bedtime, thousands of generations before anyone invented the phrase just 5 more minutes. You notice the person by the fire turning something between finger and thumb. It is small, so small that if you found it in the dirt today, you might overlook it completely. A shell, a bead, a bit of bone, piece of stone touched with pigment. It is not food, it is not a blade, it is not a water container or a digging stick, and yet it matters enough to be kept. This is where the mystery of symbolic thought begins to feel very close. The wider world at this time is still one of movement and survival. People do not have permanent houses filled with possessions. They carry what they need. Every extra object has a cost. Because weight matters when your life is measured in walking. Something small may be worth carrying only if it has value beyond the obvious. It may show belonging, it may mark age, memory, skill, kinship, beauty, grief, promise, or status. In a language of shape and colour, this is who I am. One reliable clue from archaeology is that ancient humans used pigments such as ochre long before written history. Red ochre appears at many prehistoric sites, sometimes scraped, ground, or shaped. It may have served practical purposes, including hide treatment or protection from insects, but it also may have decorated bodies, objects, or places. The difficulty, of course, is that ochre does not kindly attach a note explaining whether it was sunscreen, symbolism, or someone's favourite shade of dramatic red. You lean closer, and the firelight reveals the small object more clearly. Perhaps it is a shell with a hole pierced through it. Perhaps it was strung on fibre and worn around the neck or sewn onto clothing. You imagine it brushing against skin as someone walks, clicking softly with other beads. A tiny sound, a tiny object, a very large question. One particularly intriguing detail from deep prehistory is that some ancient shell beads were made from marine shells found far from the coast, meaning they may have travelled through exchange, migration, or careful collecting. That little shell could hold a memory of distant water, a journey, or a connection between groups. It is a humble thing, but it whispers of networks. People were not just surviving in isolated pockets. They may have been looking at one another and saying, through objects, colours, and shared forms, we recognise something together. Specialists are not fully agreed on when symbolic thinking became central to human life. Some believe ornaments, pigments, and repeated markings show that humans had already developed complex symbolic worlds well before 70,000 years ago. Others caution that archaeologists may be seeing only a fraction of what existed. Since feathers, painted skin, carved wood, woven fibre, and spoken stories rarely survive, there may have been entire worlds of meaning, vanished as quietly as breath in cold airs. The person by the fire rubs pigment onto the small object. The movement is careful, almost meditative. Their fingers are stained red. The pigment catches in the lines of the skin, settling into creases. Nearby, another person watches, then makes a short sound. Perhaps approval, perhaps advice, perhaps the ancient equivalent of that is a choice. Human beings have always had opinions. You look around the camp and begin to see possible symbols everywhere. A pattern of marks on a piece of bone, a certain way of arranging hair, a strip of hide tied around the upper arm, a stone placed beside a sleeping place, a repeated gesture before food is shared. None of these can be known with certainty from this single imagined night. But each reminds you that human meaning often lives in small, repeated acts, and meaning changes everything. If a mark can stand for a group, a memory, or a warning, then knowledge can become portable. If a bead can identify a relationship, strangers may become less strange. If a painted line can carry a story, then a person can speak even when silent. Symbolic thought allows the mind to step away from what is immediately in front of the eyes. It makes room for yesterday, tomorrow, elsewhere. Invisible things, possible things, and things that are not useful in the simple sense but are deeply necessary. You shift your weight on the cool ground. A stone presses through the thin layer of grass beneath you. The fire snaps softly. In the distance, an animal moves through brush. Its steps careful and padded. Someone at the edge of camp turns their head and listens, then relaxes. Modern life is full of symbols, though we rarely pause to notice a ring, a flag, a logo, a little heart icon sent at midnight when actual words feel too sincere. We live inside a forest of signs, for people here. Symbols may have been fewer, but perhaps more deeply felt. A single ornament might carry the weight of place, family, skill and memory. A body painted with ochre might signal adulthood. Grief, celebration, alliance, or something we cannot name. The question remains open among researchers because symbolic thought cannot be measured like the length of a bone. It leaves clues, but not direct explanations. A pierced shell suggests use as an ornament, but not the story attached to it. A pattern of marks suggests intention, but not its meaning. A burial may suggest care, ritual, or both. But the feelings of the living remain beyond reach. The person beside the fire finally sets the small object down on a piece of hide. Others nearby glance at it. No one speaks for a while. The silence is not empty. It is the silence of people who understand what something means without needing to explain it in full. You breathe in the smoke and cool night air. The camp is almost asleep, but not quite. Firelight trembles across faces, beads, tools, and stained hands. The stars overhead remain bright and indifferent, while below them, humans begin to fill the world with meanings only humans can make. And as the ember glow softens, you understand that the mystery of symbolic thought is not just when people began to decorate, mark, or imagine. It is when the world became more than itself. A shell became memory. A colour became belonging. A mark became a thought that could outlive the hand that made it. You wake before the others, or perhaps you have not really slept at all. In this journey, time behaves gently, stretching and folding as dreams do. The camp is still dim, the fire reduced to a low red heart under grey ash. The air has turned colder in the hours before dawn, and the ground seems to breathe chill upward through every stone and root. You pull the imagined hide closer around your shoulders and watch pale mist collect in the hollows beyond the camp. This morning belongs to climate, that quiet force behind so much of human history. It does not arrive like a king with banners. It arrives as a dry season that lasts too long, a herd that changes its path, a forest edge that retreats, a river that shrinks, a winter that bites a little deeper than the elders remember. Over generations, these small changes become maps of survival. People move, adapt, return, or disappear from places that once felt familiar. Around 70,000 years ago. The world is not fixed. The late Pleistocene is a time of strong climate shifts, with cold phases, dry intervals, changing coastlines, expanding grasslands, and changing animal habitats. Ice holds water away from the seas, so shorelines lie farther out than they do today. Deserts may spread in some periods, while wetter windows open pathways through regions that otherwise seem impossible to cross. To ancient people, these changes are not graphs or data points. They are hunger, opportunity, memory, and risk. A steady fact from Earth science is that human evolution unfolded during repeated Ice Age climate cycles. These cycles shaped where plants grew, where animals travelled, and where human groups could live. You might picture the environment not as the stage set behind the human story, but as a slow-moving character in it, rearranging the furniture while everyone is trying to sleep. The first people begin to stir, someone rises and stamps their feet softly against the cold, another checks the hearth and feeds it dry twigs. Smoke rises straight for a moment, then bends under a light wind. The smell is sharp, comforting and familiar. A child coughs, then nestles back under a hide. The sky is turning from charcoal to blue-grey, and the horizon glows faintly as if the sun is thinking about returning but does not want to seem too eager. You follow a small group leaving camp with digging sticks, bags, and stone flakes. Their path leads toward a valley where plants sometimes grow near seasonal water. The walk is quiet. Frost or dew clings to grass. Wetting ankles, the air tastes clean and metallic. In the distance, the land opens into patches of scrub and pale soil. A few trees stand apart, their branches twisted by wind. Here, climate is not abstract, it is read through signs. Are the grasses tall enough to hide game? Are the seed heads ready? Are there insects near the water? Have the animals passed recently? Has a familiar plant failed this year? You watch an older woman bend to examine leaves near the ground. Her fingers move with complete assurance. She knows what can be eaten now, what must be dug later. What is medicine? What is trouble wearing a leafy disguise? One unusual detail from prehistoric survival is that ancient groups may have relied heavily on flexible diets, shifting between plants, animals, shellfish, fish, roots, nuts, and opportunistic foods depending on place and season. The glamorous image of constant big game hunting is only part of the picture. Quite often, survival may have depended on people who knew exactly which unimpressive little tuber was worth digging up. History is rarely fair about giving enough applause to root vegetables. The group reaches a patch of damp ground, the soil gives slightly underfoot. A digging stick enters the earth with a soft crunch. Someone loosens a root, shakes off dirt, and places it into a hide bag. There is a rhythm to this work press. Lift, shake, sort, move. The smell of wet earth rises thick and calming. Birds call from brush. Somewhere far away, an animal bellows. Low and uncertain in the morning air, experts continue to debate how much climate stress contributed to the major changes associated with this period. Some propose that harsh or unstable environments pushed human groups to become more inventive, social, and mobile. Others suggest that climate alone cannot explain the pattern, because human creativity and migration did not always follow environmental pressure in simple ways. A drought may force movement, but it does not automatically create symbolic thought. A green corridor may invite migration, but someone still has to know how to survive beyond the familiar horizon. You look toward distant hills. In one season, those hills may hold grazing herds. In another, they may be bare and dangerous. A place of plenty can become a place of memory. A place once avoided can become a route. Ancient people must carry mental maps that change with weather and time, not the crisp blue dot map of a modern phone, cheerfully telling you to turn left into a river. But living maps made of stories, smells, landmarks, animal behavior, and warnings passed from older voices to younger ears. As the sun rises, warmth touches the valley. Insects begin their thin music. The damp ground releases a soft smell of mud and roots. The people work calmly, but their calm is not carelessness. They're alert to everything. A sudden silence among birds, a change in wind, fresh tracks, clouds gathering where clouds should not yet gather. The body becomes a weather instrument, a memory tool, and a listening device. You imagine a colder phase years from now when this valley gives less food. The group may move farther. They may meet strangers at a water source. They may exchange objects, mates, stories and techniques, or conflict may simmer, quiet and tense, before dispersing like smoke. Climate can divide people, but it can also bring them together. A shrinking river concentrates life along its banks. A wet period opens paths across land that was once too dry. In this way, weather writes chapters into human movement without ever holding a pen. Another fascinating clue comes from ancient lake beds, cave deposits, pollen, shells, and dust trapped in sediments. These natural archives allow researchers to reconstruct past environments, sometimes revealing shifts from wetter to drier conditions over long periods. The Earth keeps its own diary, though it writes in mud, minerals, and pollen grains, which is beautiful but not especially convenient bedtime reading. By midday, the group rests beneath a small tree. The shade is thin but welcome. Someone shares water from a skin. Someone else cracks a tough seed with a stone. The sound is small and satisfying. You feel heat on your arms now. The morning cold replaced by dry brightness. The same day can hold both chill and sun, scarcity and promise. You begin to understand that human survival was never about conquering nature in some loud, heroic sense. It was about listening carefully enough to remain in conversation with it. Move when the herds move, shelter when the wind turns, gather when plants are ready, remember when they fail, teach the children which signs matter, and when the old patterns no longer hold, change. The valley lies quiet around you. Grass bends in the breeze. A few roots sit in the hide bag, dusty and plain, yet precious. Beyond the ridge, other lands wait forests, coasts, deserts, rivers, and ice-bright horizons. The climate will shift again, as it always does, and humans, small beneath the sky, will keep walking, carrying fire, tools, stories, and questions through a world that never stays still. You leave the valley in the long light of afternoon, when the shadows of grass stems lie thin and dark across the ground. The people you have followed are moving again, not with panic, but with the steady calm of those who understand distance. Their feet know how to conserve strength. Their eyes travel constantly between ground, horizon, sky, and one another. The bags are heavier now with roots and gathered food. The air smells of warm dust, crushed leaves, and the faint smoke that still clings to everyone from the morning fire. Ahead, the land changes. The open basin gives way to rougher country, where stones gather in slopes and the wind moves with a colder edge. You sense that this is a crossing place, not only between valleys, but between worlds, because in this ancient time, Homo sapiens are not the only humans walking under the sky. The background matters. During this broad chapter of the late Pleistocene, several kinds of humans share the planet. Homo sapiens have deep roots in Africa and are spreading into new regions. Neanderthals live across parts of Europe and Western Asia, adapted over many thousands of years to colder climates. Denisovians, known mostly from genetic evidence and a few precious fossils, live somewhere across Asia and perhaps beyond. Other late surviving human relatives may still exist in pockets, known to us only through fragments, cave floors, and very patient laboratory work. One well-established point is that Neanderthals were not crude brutes from old cartoons and lazy museum posters. They made tools, used fire, hunted large animals, cared for injured individuals, and survived difficult environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bodies were stockier than yours, with strong limbs, broad chests, and faces shaped by the long adaptation to cold. If one stood across a valley in the fading light, wrapped in hide and watching you watch them, you would not see a monster. You would see another human presence, close and unfamiliar. The group slows near a ridge. The wind carries a different scent smoke. But not from the camp behind you. It is faint, almost hidden under dry grass and stone. Someone raises a hand. The others stop. No one speaks loudly. The children are drawn closer. A hunter crouches and studies the ground where prints mark a patch of softer soil. They are not animal tracks, they are footprints. You look at them and feel the strange intimacy of evidence. A foot pressed into mud, a body passing here before yours. Someone with hunger, memory, skill, fear. Perhaps a sore heel, because deep time may be majestic, but feet remain feet. The people wait. They listen. The ridge ahead blocks the view, but beyond it another group may be resting by a fire, scraping hides, dividing food, or watching this side just as carefully. The meeting of human cousins would not always have looked the same. Sometimes there may have been avoidance, sometimes curiosity, sometimes exchange, sometimes tension. The past rarely behaves like a simple greeting card. One small and fascinating detail from Neanderthal archaeology is that they sometimes used pigments and may have collected unusual objects such as shells. feathers or bird claws. The meaning of these finds is debated, but they suggest attention to appearance, identity, or symbolism, apparently. The urge to make a point with accessories may be older and more widespread than anyone who has ever judged a modern outfit would like to admit. You move closer to the ridge, slowly. The stones underfoot are sun-warmed on top and cool in shadow. Dry plants scratch softly against your legs. A raven circles overhead, making a rough call that echoes against the slope. Then, from beyond the rise, you hear a sound, a voice, low and short, not language you understand, not even necessarily language in the same form as yours, but unmistakably a human sound. Specialists continue to ask how these different human groups recognized one another. Did Homo sapiens and Neanderthals see each other as people, strangers, rivals, neighbors, possible partners, or something else entirely? Their bodies differed, their tool traditions could differ, and their ways of moving through the land may have differed too. Yet they were close enough biologically to have children together. As later genetic evidence would show, that fact alone makes any simple story feel too thin. You crest the ridge in your imagination and see them at a distance. A small group rests near a rock shelter. Their fire is low and smoky. One figure sits broad-shouldered beside it, working at something with a stone edge. Another stands near the shelter mouth, looking outward. Their clothing is made from hides. Their movements are deliberate and efficient. There is no theatrical moment, no swelling music, no dramatic stare across destiny. Just two groups in a cold landscape, each aware that the other exists. The Homo sapiens group does not approach immediately. They settle lower behind the ridge, speaking softly. A decision must be made. Move away and avoid risk. Watch and wait. Signal peacefully. Search for another route. In a world of small populations, every encounter matters. Strangers can bring knowledge, mates, tools, and alliances. They can also bring danger or disease. Modern humans still have complicated feelings about unexpected neighbors, and we have doorbells. The wind shifts. One from the other camp slides across the ridge, carrying the smell of burned wood and cooked meat. Your stomach answers, which is not very scholarly of it, but very human. The sun lowers further, turning the rock shelter gold at the edges. The standing figure across the way turns their head, perhaps catching scent or seeing sound for a few breaths. The landscape holds still. This is where the deep past becomes tenderly difficult. We know these human cousins existed. We know their ranges overlapped. We know there was interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, and between Homo sapiens and Denisovans, but the lived experience of meeting remains beyond direct recovery. Was there fear, curiosity, recognition? Did children stare at one another? Did adults trade stone, hides, food, or gestures? Did they learn from each other? Did they laugh at different things? Almost certainly. Someone at some point made a social situation awkward. That too feels ancient. Some researchers argue that Homo sapiens had broader social networks or more flexible symbolic systems, giving them advantages when entering new lands. Others emphasize that Neanderthals were highly capable and that their disappearance cannot be explained by simple inferiority. Climate shifts, small population sizes, competition, disease, interbreeding, and chance may all have played a role. The argument is not settled, and perhaps it should not be forced into a single cause. Dusk gathers. The Homo sapiens group chooses caution. They do not descend openly toward the shelter. Instead, they mark the place in memory, the shape of the ridge, the smell of smoke, the direction of tracks, the sound of other voices in the wind. Tomorrow they may move along a different path, or perhaps, after watching longer, they may approach with lowered hands and careful signals. You remain on the ridge as the sky darkens. Two fires glow in the same landscape, separated by distance. Attention and uncertainty. Around one fire, your ancestors speak softly. Around the other, close cousins tend their own warmth, against the night. For a brief moment in deep time, humanity is plural. The world holds more than one way to be human, and as the first stars appear, you feel the quiet wonder of it. Not a battle, not a cartoon ladder of progress, just neighbouring lights in a cold old world. Each one fragile, each one real, each one carrying a story that would mostly vanish, except for bones, tools, genes, and the faint smoke of imagination. You stay on the ridge as night settles fully, watching the two distant fires burn like small, careful thoughts in the dark. One belongs to the people you have followed, the other belongs to those nearby cousins, strong-bodied and watchful, wrapped in their own long story. Between them lies a slope of stone, grass and uncertainty. Above them, the same stars burn without choosing sides. The air grows colder. You can feel it in your hands first, then in your face, then in the way your shoulders want to fold inward. Smoke from both camps drifts and thins, sometimes crossing in the wind before vanishing into the dark. It is a quiet image, but it carries one of the most surprising truths about human evolution. The story of our species is not pure separation. It is also contact, mixture, and inheritance. For a long time, many people imagined human evolution as a line, one form replacing another in tidy order, like a school chart with arrows and confident labels. But the deeper scientists look, the more that line becomes a branching, tangled path. Different human groups lived at the same time, their territories overlapped, and in some places, they met closely enough to leave traces not only in stone tools or bones, but in living people today. Genetic research has shown that many people outside sub-Saharan Africa carry small amounts of Neanderthal ancestry, while some populations, especially in parts of Oceania and Asia, carry Denisovan ancestry as well. That is one of the firm findings that change the way we think about the past. Ancient meetings did not simply end in silence. Some of them became family. You begin walking down from the ridge, following the softer line of a dry gully. Stones shift underfoot with quiet clicks. A night wind moves through low shrubs, bringing scents of dust, smoke, and faint animal musk. The world is dark, but not empty. You imagine people moving carefully in such conditions, keeping close, listening before speaking, knowing that a misplaced step can say more than intended. What might contact have looked like? Not a formal treaty? Certainly. No one sat beneath a banner with neatly translated terms and refreshments on a side table. More likely, encounters varied. A chance meeting at water, a group seen across open land, tracks noticed near a shelter, a cautious exchange of food, stone or hides, a stolen glance, a shared campsite after many days of watching. Perhaps fear at first, then curiosity, perhaps distrust, then kinship, perhaps sometimes affection. One unusual detail from ancient DNA studies is that the Neanderthal ancestry found in modern humans is not spread evenly across the genome. Some inherited segments appear to have been useful, while others faded over generations. This suggests that ancient mixing was followed by natural selection, keeping some genetic variants and reducing others. In other words, the past did not simply hand us a neat little genetic souvenir, it handed us a complicated bundle, and evolution quietly sorted through it afterward. You reach a flatter place below the ridge where dry grass bends under the wind. In your mind, the two groups have not yet approached, but the possibility of approach hangs in the air. One person from the Homo sapiens camp may have seen a Neanderthal tool and wondered about its maker. Someone from the other camp may have watched the newcomers moving in a slightly different way, carrying objects from far away, using signs, gestures, ornaments, or techniques unfamiliar in this valley. The human body remembers such meetings in ways no story can fully preserve. Some Neanderthal genetic variants have been linked in modern research to traits involving immunity, skin, hair, and responses to environments. Although these effects are complex and should not be turned into simple claims, Denisovan ancestry appears to have helped some later populations adapt to high-altitude living, most famously in Tibetan populations, through genetic variation related to oxygen use. That is a remarkable thought. A meeting in deep prehistory may echo in the breath of people living high among mountains tens of thousands of years later. The question remains lively among researchers: how often did these groups meet? And what did those meetings mean? Some evidence points to multiple episodes of interbreeding in different regions and times. Others note that the genetic contribution was real but limited, suggesting that contact may have been occasional rather than constant. The archaeological record rarely gives us the human details. It offers traces, not conversation. You pause near a small cluster of stones where moonlight lies pale on their surfaces. The silence has depth. Somewhere far off, an animal calls, long and low. It fades, and the hush returns. You imagine a child born from two human worlds, carried in someone's arms beside a fire. What language did that child hear? What tools did they learn to make? Which stories shaped their sleep? Did anyone think of them as an unusual, or simply as one more child needing warmth, food, patience, and someone to stop them from poking the fire? Modern people often search for identity as if it must be clean and simple, but deep history is not clean. It is shared, layered, and sometimes beautifully inconvenient. Your ancestors did not move through an empty planet waiting politely for them to inherit it. They moved through a world already inhabited by relatives with their own histories. Some were avoided, some vanished. Some were absorbed into us, not as myths, but as tiny stretches of DNA carried forward through generations. Another curious point is that the first hints of Denisovans came not from a complete skeleton, but from fragmentary remains in Denisova Cave in Siberia, including a finger bone and teeth. From such small pieces, scientists reconstructed the existence of an entire human group. It is almost comically modest, like discovering a lost library from a single torn page. Except the page is a finger bone, the librarian is genetics. You continue through the dark, feeling the old landscape around you. The ground cools under your feet. The wind touches the back of your neck. The smell of smoke grows stronger as you near the Homo sapiens camp again. People there are mostly asleep, gathered close to the fire, their bodies curved beneath hides. Yet a few remain awake, perhaps thinking about the other group beyond the ridge, perhaps planning the next day's route. In that quiet, you realize how strange and tender inheritance can be. The ancient relatives outside the camp are not simply lost branches. Some part of them has travelled onward, hidden in descendants who would never know their names. A useful immune response, a slight adaptation, a genetic trace from a vanished population. These are not grand monuments, but they endure. Specialists still disagree about how to interpret the balance of contact, competition, and coexistence. Did Homo sapiens replace other groups mostly through numbers and adaptability? Did interbreeding soften the boundaries between populations? Were some disappearances less like endings, and more like merging? The answer may differ by region, by climate, by century, by the luck of small groups on difficult land. The fire ahead glows low and steady. Someone turns in sleep. A hand rests near a string of beads or a small tool, close enough to find in the dark. Above, the stars remain clear. You sit once more near the coals and let the thought settle gently. You are not the product of a simple line. You are a living archive of crossings, separations, accidents, meetings, and survivals somewhere in the deep past. Strangers became kin, and through that quiet, complicated kinship, the ancient world still breathes inside the present. Morning returns with a thin, silver light, and you find the camp already stirring. The night's questions have not disappeared, but they have softened into the practical needs of another day. Someone feeds the coals, someone shakes dust from a hide, someone checks the bindings on a tool. tugging carefully at cord and resin, because a loose point at the wrong moment is not just inconvenient. It is the ancient version of equipment failure, except there is no customer service number and the warranty is mostly hope. Today, the group is preparing to... You can feel it in the camp before anyone gives a clear signal. Objects are being gathered. Ash is being covered. Food is divided. Children are guided toward the centre. The small circle of sleeping places, tools, and shared warmth begins to loosen, like a knot carefully untied. There is no permanent house to lock behind them, no door to close, no little note on the table saying back soon. There is only the land, memory, and the path ahead. The world of these people is shaped by movement, not wandering without purpose, as older stories sometimes imagined, but travelling with deep knowledge. They follow water, animal roots, ripening plants, safe shelters, seasonal winds, and social ties. A valley may be known because a grandmother crossed it as a child. A distant ridge may matter because stone from that place makes fine tools. A coastline, if nearby, may provide shellfish, fish, birds, and other foods during certain seasons. Movement is not restlessness. It is a form of belonging spread across landscape. One strong piece of evidence from prehistory is that Homo sapiens eventually spread out of Africa and into many parts of the world, reaching Australia by at least around 50,000 years ago, possibly earlier according to some research. That journey required more than strong legs. It required planning, memory, social coordination, and adaptation to unfamiliar environments. At some point, human groups crossed rivers, deserts, forests, coasts, and perhaps short sea gaps. That is not a casual afternoon stroll, no matter how optimistic the weather looks. You walk with the group as they leave the old camp. The fire is not abandoned entirely. Embers may be carried if conditions allow, tucked in material that can keep them alive, though people can also make fire when needed if they have the right skills and materials. The ground slopes downward toward a pale ribbon of water. The morning air smells of damp grass and cold ash. A bird lifts from the reeds with a sudden flutter, then settles again farther off, apparently offended by everyone's travel plans. People move in a loose line. The youngest children are helped over rough stones. Older children carry small bundles, learning the quiet dignity of being useful while probably wishing usefulness weighed less. Adults scan the horizon. The pace is steady. Nobody rushes, because distance punishes those who treat the first hour like a race. The path leads toward a river crossing in the rainy season. This place may be dangerous or impossible. Now, the water is lower, sliding over stones in shallow channels. You hear it before you see it clearly. A cool murmur beneath the wind. The river smell rises clean and mineral, mixed with mud, reeds, and the faint musk of animals that came to drink during the night. One lesser known but fascinating detail is that ancient migrations may have followed shifting green corridors, temporary routes through regions that became wetter during certain climate phases. Places that later turned harsh or dry could, for a time, open like doors. A landscape that looks impossible in one generation may be passable in another. Deep history has a way of making the map breathe. At the riverbank, the group pauses. No one simply splashes across. They study the water, the stones, the banks on the far side. Someone points to tracks in the mud. Someone else tests a branch against the current. The children wait. A baby fusses, then quiets when tucked closer against a body. The water flashes pale under the morning sun, beautiful and indifferent. There is debate among researchers about which routes early Homo sapiens took as they expanded beyond Africa. Some evidence supports movements through northeastern Africa and into the Near East. Other models suggest coastal pathways may have been important, with people using marine resources as they moved along shorelines. Still others emphasize that migrations likely happened in waves, with some early movements failing, retreating, mixing, or leaving little trace. The clean arrow on a classroom map is useful, but it hides uncertainty. Real people move like weather, not like diagrams. You step carefully across with them. The first stones are slick. Cold water touches your ankles, then your shins. It pulls gently at your legs, stronger than it looks. A hand reaches back to help another person. Someone passes a bundle across. A child laughs when the water splashes too high, then gasps because cold water has excellent comic timing. On the far bank, people shake their feet, adjust hides and continue. Beyond the river, the land opens into unfamiliar country. The group knows some things about it, perhaps from earlier journeys or from stories exchanged with others, but not everything. That is the tension of migration knowledge meets uncertainty. A familiar plant may not grow here. A known animal may be absent. The stone may fracture poorly. The water may hide sickness. A shelter may already be used by another group. Every new place asks for attention. Modern travel often begins with reviews, maps, tickets, charges, and someone insisting you should arrive 2 hours early. Here, travel begins with bodies, memory, weather, and trust. You cannot check the route in advance. You must read the world as it appears. By midday, the group rests under trees near a slope of exposed rock. Someone examines the stone, striking a small piece to test its quality. The sound is sharp and clean. Another person gathers dry grass. Someone shares food from a hide bundle. The smell of roots and smoke clings to everything. Sweat dries on skin as the day warms. Insects hum near the shade. You notice how migration is not only departure, it is learning. The group must turn new places into remembered places. A dangerous ravine becomes a warning. A good water source becomes a destination. A patch of plants becomes seasonal knowledge. A distant landmark becomes part of a story. Slowly, the unfamiliar becomes mapped in the mind. Some scientists suggest that the success of Homo sapiens lay partly in this ability to build flexible cultural knowledge. Not every individual needed to know everything, because knowledge could be shared. One person remembers plants, another reads tracks, another shapes tools, another knows stories of far roots. Together, the group carries more than any one person can hold. This is quiet genius, the kind that does not need applause to matter. Late in the day, you climb a gentle rise and look back. The river glints behind you, already becoming part of the past. Ahead, the horizon is wide, hazy, and unknown. The group continues, small beneath the sky, carrying embers, tools, food, children, memories, and perhaps little ornaments that speak of who they are. You understand that these crossings were not single heroic moments. They were days of sore feet, careful choices, shared meals, wrong turns, good luck, fear, wonder, and rest. Step by step, ancient humans widened their world. Across rivers and empty horizons, they followed signs no modern map can show, and in doing so, they began the long movement that would eventually carry human voices to nearly every corner of Earth. You continue beyond the river as the afternoon light softens, and this land begins to offer new materials to anyone patient enough to notice them. The slope ahead is scattered with stones of different colours, some dull and crumbly, others smooth, dark and promising to a modern passer-by. They might be little more than ankle hazards to the people walking beside you. They are possibilities waiting underfoot. A few members of the group slow down near an outcrop. The others continue to a patch of shade nearby, where children can rest and food can be shared. The air smells of warm rock, dry grass, and skin dusted with travel. Insects make a thin, buzzing sound in the heat. Somewhere in the scrub, a lizard darts over a stone and vanishes so quickly it seems less like an animal and more like the land changing its mind. Here, the story turns toward tools, but not in the flat museum sense where an object lies behind glass with a label and a small spotlight, looking lonely and important. These tools are not frozen artifacts. They are part of living hands. They cut meat, scrape hides, shape wood, crack bones, prepare plants, and help people carry the day from hunger toward evening. A tool is not just technology. It is practice, memory, and touch. The larger setting is still a world without metal. There are no bronze blades, no iron knives, no ploughs, no nails, no wheels. Stone is one of the great materials of survival, but not every stone will do. Some break unpredictably, some crumble, some are too heavy, too rare, too stubborn, or simply rude in the way only a bad rock can be. Good stone must fracture with a sharp edge. It must answer the maker's strike. One dependable archaeological pattern from this era is the long use of carefully made stone flakes and points, often produced through planned sequences of shaping. In many Middle Stone Age and later contexts, toolmakers prepared stone cores so that useful flakes could be removed with precision. That means the final sharp edge was imagined before it existed. The maker had to see the future inside the stone. You watch an older toolmaker kneel beside the outcrop. Their hands move slowly over the raw material, turning pieces, testing weight, feeling texture. A younger person watches closely. No one lectures in the modern way. There is no classroom, no slide presentation, no one saying. As you can see on page 4, the lesson is in rhythm. Pick up, turn, strike lightly, listen, reject, try another. A stone is placed on a larger rock. Another stone strikes it with a crisp, ringing sound. A flake leaps free and lands in dust. The toolmaker lifts it, examines the edge, and grunts softly, perhaps satisfied, perhaps merely willing to continue the relationship. The younger watcher reaches for it, then stops when the older hand shifts slightly. Not yet. Look first, touch later. The sound of tool making is oddly calming when heard at this distance. Tap. Pause, scrape, tap. It joins the wind and insect hum. Tiny chips scatter over the ground like rough grey petals. The smell of stone dust rises faintly, dry and mineral, almost like rain that never arrived. One small surprise from ancient technology is that some prehistoric people heat-treated stone to improve the way it fractured. At sites in southern Africa, evidence suggests that silkcrete was heated before knapping, making it easier to shape into sharp tools. Imagine learning that a certain stone becomes more cooperative after fire, and then passing that knowledge on. It is not flashy, but it is brilliant. Also, it proves that humans have been trying to make materials behave better for a very long time. Such techniques matter because they show planning across time. First, find the right stone, then heat it under controlled conditions, then cool it, then shape it, then attach it, perhaps, to a wooden shaft with adhesive and binding. This is not random smashing. This is a chain of thought made physical. Researchers continue to weigh how much these tool changes reveal about the mind. Some see increasingly complex tools as evidence for advanced planning, teaching, and perhaps language. Others warn that stone tools alone cannot tell us everything about thought, since different groups may make different objects for reasons tied to materials, traditions, or needs rather than mental limits. A simple-looking tool may come from a complex life. A complex-looking tool may be part of a familiar routine. The stone speaks, but not always in full sentences. You walk toward the shade where another kind of work is happening. A wooden shaft lies across someone's lap. They scrape it smooth with a stone flake, turning it slowly. The wood releases a faint green scent, fresh beneath the dry air. Another person warms a dark, sticky substance near a coal. Resin, gum, bitumen, or a mixture with ochre may be used as glue, depending on place and materials. A point is fitted to the shaft, adjusted, removed, adjusted again. The patience is almost musical. In your own time, tools arrive wrapped in plastic. with instruction booklets that somehow make things worse. Here, the instruction manual is a person, the warranty is experience. If a tool fails, the lesson may be immediate and memorable. Children nearby imitate the adults with safer fragments. One taps a little stone against another and produces nothing useful at all, but looks pleased. Someone laughs softly. The child tries again. This is how skill begins, not with mastery, but with sound, imitation, error, and encouragement. The hand learns before the mind can fully explain what is happening. The toolmaker tests the newly hafted point by pressing it into a piece of hide or wood. The binding holds, the adhesive darkens as it cools. The finished object rests across their knees. It is elegant in its quiet way stone. Wood, fibre, glue, and knowledge joined into one thing. It extends the body. It carries intention farther than the hand alone. Another useful detail from the archaeological record is that people sometimes transported stone over long distances, either by carrying it themselves or through exchange. This suggests that certain materials were valued enough to move across landscapes. A good stone source could become part of a group's seasonal route, social memory, or contact with neighbours. The landscape was not just food and shelter, it was also a map of materials. You pick up one discarded flake in imagination and hold it to the light. Its edge is thin, almost delicate. It could slice skin before you notice, which is a humbling reminder that ancient does not mean crude. The flake catches sunlight along its ridge. It is beautiful, though beauty may not be its purpose. Then again, humans have always had trouble separating function from elegance. As evening approaches, the group gathers what can be used and leaves behind what cannot. Chips remain scattered near the outcrop, a faint signature that may survive long after voices vanish. Future archaeologists may kneel here, brush away soil, and reconstruct a moment from the pattern of debris. They may see where the maker sat, which direction flakes fell, what stone was chosen, what was rejected. From a scatter of fragments, they will imagine hands. The people move on, carrying sharpened edges wrapped safely in hide, points ready for use, and perhaps unfinished cores to shape later. The day cools, shadows lengthen. The tools do not gleam like treasure, but they change everything. They make food easier to prepare, hides easier to work, wood easier to shape, danger easier to answer. You walk beside them, listening to the soft knock of objects in a bundle. Each sound is practical, ordinary, and profound. These tools are not the beginning of intelligence. They are evidence of intelligence already flowing through the hands, carried across rivers, taught by firelight, refined over generations, in stone and wood. The ancient mind leaves a trace sharp enough to reach you across 70,000 years. You walk on with the group as the evening lowers itself gently over the land. The newly shaped tools are tucked into bundles. The river is now behind you, hidden by the folds of earth, and the outcrop where stone chips glittered in the dust has become another remembered place. Ahead, smoke rises faintly from a new camp, thin and pale against the dimming sky. Someone has chosen a sheltered hollow where the wind weakens, and where a line of low trees offers both fuel and shade. The group enters this hollow without ceremony. No one announces that the day has been successful. No one gives a speech about teamwork, which is probably for the best. Instead, people begin doing the things that make survival possible. Wood is gathered, a hearth is cleared, children are settled, food is sorted, tools are placed where they can be found. A tired person sits down with the slow dignity of someone whose feet have been negotiating with gravity all day. This part of the journey brings you to cooperation, one of the quiet engines of human evolution. It is easy to picture ancient survival as a test of individual toughness. One brave hunter, one clever toolmaker, one strong wanderer facing the cold world alone. But the evidence of human life points again and again toward shared work. Food is shared. Children are raised by more than one pair of hands. Skills are taught. Injured or elderly individuals may be cared for. Knowledge flows through the group like warmth through the evening fire. The broad setting is a world of small communities, but small does not mean simple. Each person depends on others in ways both obvious and subtle. A hunter may bring meat, but someone else knows where edible roots grow. A toolmaker may shape a fine point, but another person may know the best wood for a shaft. A child may be watched by an older sibling, an aunt, a grandparent, or someone with no neat modern label. The group survives because ability is distributed. No one carries the whole world alone. Archaeology and anthropology offer a steady clue here. Humans are unusually cooperative primates, especially when it comes to sharing knowledge, caring for young, and coordinating around shared goals. Hunter-gatherer societies observed in recent history vary widely, and they are not living fossils, but they help remind us that foraging life often depends on social relationships as much as raw strength. A person who refuses to share, listen, learn, or help may quickly discover that the wilderness has very limited patience for solo drama. You sit near the new fire as sparks begin to lift, the air is cool again, and the smell of fresh smoke mingles with crushed grass and the earthy scent of roots laid near the coals. Someone divides food into portions, not equal in a mechanical sense. Perhaps, but attentive. A child receives a soft piece. An older person is handed something easier to chew. A hunter with a sore leg stretches quietly while another person inspects the swelling with practical concern. The scene is ordinary, and that is what makes it powerful. Cooperation is not always heroic. Sometimes it is handing someone water. Sometimes it is remembering that a child fears the dark. Sometimes it is repairing another person's binding because tomorrow they may repair yours. The small courtesies of survival are older than politeness manuals, and probably more useful. One charmingly specific detail from the study of ancient life is that some prehistoric individuals survived serious injuries or conditions long enough for bone to heal, suggesting that others helped them through periods when they could not have managed easily alone. This does not mean every ancient group was gentle at all times. Life could be harsh, but care existed. Compassion has a history, and it is older than writing, older than cities, older than the little inspirational posters that tell us to be kind in office hallways. The fire strengthens, faces gather around it. Someone begins working on a hide while another person twists fibers into cord. Two children sit close together, whispering and trying not to be noticed while clearly doing something they should not be doing. An adult glances at them with a look that says deep time has changed many things, but not that. The debate among specialists is not whether cooperation mattered, but how much it explains the extraordinary success of Homo sapiens. Some researchers emphasize social networks, arguing that larger or better connected groups allowed ideas, mates, and resources to move between communities. Others focus on language, symbolism, ecological flexibility, or demographic growth. The strongest explanations may not choose just one cause. Cooperation may have been the thread tying many advantages together. You look beyond the fire into the deepening blue. Somewhere, perhaps not far away, another group may be camping. They might be kin, they might be strangers, they might be people seen once a year near a water source or stone outcrop. Such wider networks could matter greatly. If a drought strikes, a group with allies may know where to go. If a tool-making trick appears, it may spread. If partners are exchanged between groups, genetic diversity increases. If stories are shared, maps grow larger. Trust is fragile, though it must be built and maintained. A gift may help, a repeated meeting may help, a shared ornament or pigment style may signal belonging. A familiar song, gesture, or story may soften fear. You begin to see symbolic thought from the previous night in a new light. Symbols are not only decoration, they may help cooperation stretch beyond the immediate family, beyond the people whose faces you know in sleep. Today, We might prove identity with passwords, documents, profile pictures, and, for reasons nobody fully understands, 6-digit codes that arrive exactly when your hands are full. In this older world, identity may be carried in scars, beads, speech patterns, ornaments, body paint, tools, and memory. These signs may help people decide who can be trusted, who has obligation, who belongs, and who might be dangerous. A soft wind moves through the hollow, the flames lean, then straighten. The smell of cooking grows richer, and people shift closer. Food is passed around, conversation rises and falls. One person repeats a gesture made earlier at the river crossing, and another laughs, apparently remembering the child's cold water surprise. The laughter is quiet, but it relaxes the circle. Shared memory becomes social glue. You notice that no one here survives by talent alone. Even the most skilled hunter was once a child who had to be obeyed. Even the best toolmaker learned from someone patient or impatient enough to teach. Even the sharpest observer depends on others to watch what they miss. Cooperation allows human knowledge to become cumulative. One lifetime is short, a group can remember longer. That may be one reason this period matters so much, around 70,000 years ago, or within that broad and debated window. Human groups may have become better at sustaining networks of knowledge, not just inventing, but preserving, not just learning, but teaching, not just surviving, but connecting. Night settles around the hollow. The fire paints warm light on hands, faces, tools, and tired feet. Someone hums softly, a low sound without urgency. A child finally gives up on mischief and leans into sleep. Above the camp, stars appear one by one. You sit within the circle and feel the secret power of cooperation. It is not loud, it does not glitter. It is carried in shared warmth, shared food, shared memory, and the simple fact that when the dark presses close, humans move nearer to one another. You wake into a morning filled with small sounds. A stick breaks under someone's foot. A child whispers too loudly and is answered by another child whispering even more loudly, which is the ancient and apparently timeless method of making secrecy impossible. The fire in the hollow has become a soft bed of coals, and the first light of day rests on the edges of sleeping hides. Stone tools, and bundles tied carefully for travel. The air is cool enough to make breath visible for a moment. It smells of ash, damp leaves, and the faint sweetness of roots roasted the night before. A thin mist hangs close to the ground. Beyond the camp, birds begin their morning calls, one after another, like cautious instruments joining a very old song. This part of the journey belongs to children and to learning. Not learning in the modern sense of rows of desks, bells, worksheets, and someone trying to explain fractions while everyone silently wonders when lunch is. This learning is woven into movement, hunger, play, imitation, correction, and story. It is not separate from life, it is life. Handed carefully from one generation to the next, the world these children are born into is rich with knowledge, but almost none of it is written down. There are no manuals for which plant can be eaten, no diagrams for making a point, no warning label on the mushroom that will ruin everyone's afternoon. A child must learn from watching, listening, touching, practicing, being corrected, and sometimes being laughed at kindly when a simple task goes sideways. The survival of the group depends on young minds becoming skilled minds. One secure insight from anthropology and archaeology is that human childhood is unusually long compared with many other animals. Human children need years of care, teaching, and protection before they can fully support themselves. That long childhood may look inefficient at first, like nature forgot to install the quick start option, but it gives the brain time to absorb language, social rules, tool use, environmental knowledge, and the subtle art of knowing when an adult's silence means stop immediately. You watch a small child crouch near a pile of flakes left from yesterday's toolmaking. The sharp pieces have been moved away, but safer fragments remain. The child picks one up and taps it against another stone. Nothing much happens. They tap again, harder. A little chip jumps free and lands in dust. Their eyes widen as if they have personally invented technology. Nearby, an older child looks unimpressed, which is also part of education. An adult notices and comes closer. They do not take over at once. They adjust the child's hand, turn the stone, show the angle, and strike once with slow clarity. The sound is crisp. The child leans forward, absorbing not just the action, but the posture, pressure, timing, and confidence. So much knowledge lives in the body before it becomes words. There is a delightful detail in the archaeological record that some ancient stone tool sites contain pieces that look like beginner attempts or practice flakes, suggesting that children or inexperienced learners may have been trying to make tools. Not every awkward flake is a child's work. Of course, adults can also have bad days, as anyone who has assembled furniture can confirm. But the possibility of children learning through practice gives the ancient ground a surprisingly intimate feeling. You follow a group of children toward the edge of camp, where an older woman is sorting plants. Her hands are quick, but gentle. She separates leaves, roots, and stems into small piles. One child reaches for a plant, and she makes a soft, correcting sound. The child freezes. She lifts another plant instead, holds it under their nose, and says something short. The child smells it, frowns, and repeats the sound back to her. Perhaps the word means safe, perhaps bitter, perhaps later. You cannot know, but you can see the lesson entering the memory. This is education without a classroom, but it's not casual. The curriculum is enormous. Children must learn tracks, seasons, kinship, toolmaking, food preparation, dangers, stories, gestures, and the emotional weather of the group. They must learn who comforts, who jokes, who has authority, who is grieving, who knows the route, and who should not be bothered while sharpening stone. Social intelligence is survival intelligence. Researchers are still working through how cultural learning shaped human evolution. Some argue that our species gained a major advantage because knowledge could accumulate across generations more effectively than in other hominin groups. Others point out that Neanderthals and other relatives also learned, taught, and maintained traditions, so the difference may have been one of scale, networks, or flexibility rather than a simple presence or absence of culture. As usual, the past refuses to behave like a tidy contest. The morning warms. Sunlight spills into the hollow and turns the mist transparent. Children are given small tasks. One gathers twigs, another carries a light bundle. A third watches a baby, though with the solemn expression of someone who believes this responsibility should come with better snacks. The baby, wrapped close in hide, chews on a strip of leather with deep philosophical focus. You notice how learning happens through play. Two children chase each other between shrubs, then stop to inspect tracks in damp soil. One presses their own foot beside the print. Another points toward the direction the animal moved. Their game has become a lesson. Or perhaps the lesson was always hiding inside the game. Practice does not need to announce itself to be powerful. The texture of this morning is gentle. Hides rustle, cord tightens around bundles. Someone scrapes a wooden shaft smooth. The sound soft and repetitive. A child hums while sorting sticks by size. Although the system seems to make sense only to them, the smell of fresh smoke returns as the fire is coaxed brighter. Warmth touches the cold ground. You think about memory in this world. To teach a child is to extend life beyond one body. A route remembered by an elder can guide people after that elder is gone. A plant name can save someone years later. A story about a dangerous river crossing can become laughter, then warning, then tradition. Knowledge survives by becoming shared. Modern people often store memory outside ourselves, in books, videos, files, and glowing rectangles that occasionally demand updates at the worst possible moment. Here, memory lives in repetition. Tell the story again, show the strike again, walk the route again, sing the line again, correct the child again. Not harshly, not always gently, but persistently. Culture is repetition with meaning. A young girl sits near the fire beside a man repairing a binding. She watches his fingers twist fibre around stone and wood. He pauses and hands the tool to her, letting her feel how tight the cord must be. She pulls, it holds, he nods. It is a small moment, barely visible in the grand sweep of human evolution. Yet these are the moments that keep knowledge alive. In another corner of camp, an older child tells a younger one something with exaggerated gestures. The younger child laughs, then tries to copy the gesture and gets it wrong. The older one corrects them, with the grand impatience of someone who's been alive perhaps 3 more years and is therefore a recognized authority. The adults ignore this, wisely. The camp begins to move again, slowly gathering itself for the day. Children are tucked into the rhythm of travel. They do not float outside the group's purpose. They are noisy, fragile, curious carriers of the future. Their minds are the place where stone techniques, plant knowledge, social rules, songs, jokes, fears, and hopes will continue. As you leave the hollow, you look back and see small footprints crossing larger ones in the soft earth. Most will vanish by evening. Rain, wind, animals, and time will erase them, but some lessons learned this morning will travel for decades inside living memory, then pass again into smaller hands. And that may be one of the quietest marvels of this ancient world. Before writing, before schools, before libraries, humanity built a living chain of attention. One person showed, another watched, one person remembered, another repeated. Beneath the morning sky, with smoke in the air and cold grass underfoot, children learned the ancient world, and the ancient world found a way to continue. You continue with the group into a day that feels quieter than the others, as if the land itself has lowered its voice. The sun climbs behind a thin veil of cloud, softening the hard edges of stone and grass. The wind is mild. It moves through the shrubs with a dry, brushing sound, not strong enough to chill, but steady enough to carry scents from one hollow to another. Crushed leaves, old smoke, damp soil, and the faint animal smell of hides warmed by human bodies. This part of the journey is not about grand migrations, unusual tools, or dramatic encounters with other human cousins. It is about the hidden life beyond the camps, the ordinary hours that rarely survive in archaeology. So much of prehistory reaches us through durable things: stone flakes, bones, shells, pigments, teeth, hearths, and cave sediments. But most of life is made of softer materials. A woven strap, a sleeping place, and a joke, a lullaby, a shared glance, a bowl made from bark, a small kindness at the end of a difficult walk. Time eats these things first. The wider setting remains a mobile world. The group may stay in one place for a few days, a few weeks, or return seasonally, depending on water, food, shelter, and safety. There are no permanent walls here, but there are places that feel known. A certain tree gives shade at midday. A rock face blocks the wind. A shallow hollow stays dry after rain. A patch of grass is soft enough for sleeping. Home, in this world, is less a fixed address and more a pattern of return. One reliable lesson from archaeology is that hearths are among the most important traces of ancient domestic life. A hearth can reveal repeated use of fire, food preparation, tool-making, warmth, and gathering around it. Archaeologists may find burned bone, stone flakes, ash, charcoal, and sometimes the remains of plants. Yet even a hearth tells only part of the story. It shows where people gathered, but not everything they whispered there. You enter a small temporary camp set near a line of trees. The group is not in a hurry today. Some members have gone to check nearby resources, others remain behind. A child sleeps in the shade, one arm flung out dramatically, as if exhausted by the demands of being carried. Someone scrapes a hide slowly, the tool moving with a dry, rasping sound. Another person repairs a carrying bag, pulling fibre through holes along the edge. Their fingers are darkened with use, nails worn, movements precise. The air smells of smoke and rawhide, a heavy, earthy scent softened by warm grass. You sit near the hearth, where embers wait under ash. A woman stirs them and adds a twist of dry grass. The flame appears gradually, a little orange tongue licking upward, then settling into a steady burn. The fire is small today, just enough for warmth, smoke, and cooking. Not every fire needs to be a great blazing symbol of civilization. Sometimes it is just there to make roots less stubborn. A small, easily missed detail from ancient life is that many tools and containers were probably made from perishable materials such as wood, bark, fibre, leather, reeds, and sinew. These rarely survive, especially in open sites. This means the material world of early humans was almost certainly richer than the stone record alone suggests. If you judged modern life only by what survives for 70,000 years, future archaeologists might think we were very passionate about ceramics, concrete, and little bits of plastic, which would not be entirely wrong, but still deeply incomplete. You notice the textures around you. Hide clothing is not smooth like modern fabric. It has stiffness in places, softness in others, patches where it has been scraped thinner, seams where fibre or sinew pulls the edges together. A sleeping mat of grass or reeds crackles faintly when moved. Wooden handles are polished by the hands. Cordage is rough against the fingers. A stone scraper sits nearby with a dull sheen along its used edge. The hidden life of the camp is full of maintenance, repairing, drying, sorting, cleaning, sharpening, rebinding, checking. These tasks do not sound exciting, which is exactly why they matter. Survival is often maintenance wearing a humble little hat. A loose strap fixed now prevents spilled food later. A hide scraped properly keeps someone warmer. A tool placed in the right bundle can be found quickly when light is fading. Those who study deep prehistory often caution that the archaeological record is biased toward what lasts. Stone lasts, bone sometimes lasts, shell can last, but soft routines vanish. This makes it difficult to reconstruct the daily emotional texture of ancient life. Were people playful? Almost certainly. Did they sing? Very likely. Though proof is elusive, did they have favourite sleeping spots? Personal ornaments, recurring jokes, small resentments, and tender loyalties. The evidence cannot answer directly, but human nature gently leans that way. You hear soft laughter near the trees. Two adults are trying to untangle a length of cord that has somehow become a knot of impressive complexity. One of them pulls the wrong loop, making it worse. The other says something with the tone you understand perfectly despite not knowing a word. It is the tone of well done genius. The laughter that follows is quiet, warm, and wonderfully ordinary. A child wakes and begins to cry, not loudly, but with sleepy confusion. Someone lifts them, presses them close, and rocks gently. The crying fades into hiccups, then silence. The adult continues rocking long after the child has settled. The movement is slow, repetitive, deeply human. No fossil records that rhythm. No stone tool preserves the weight of a child against a shoulder. Yet such moments help make human life possible. You walk toward the edge of the camp, where food is being prepared. Roots are brushed clean, seeds are sorted. A piece of meat is cut into strips and laid near smoke. The smell is rich and savoury. Hands work with practiced economy. Nothing is wasted. A cracked bone is saved for marrow. Scraps may feed the fire or be used for something else. Even ash has uses. The ancient household, the ancient, if we may call it that, is a place of continuous transformation. A thoughtful disagreement remains among researchers about how much we can infer from later hunter-gatherer societies when imagining deep prehistory. Some comparisons are useful, because mobile foraging groups share certain practical challenges. Yet no modern or recent group is a perfect window into 70,000 years ago. Cultures change, environments differ. The safest approach is humble. Use comparison carefully. Combine it with archaeology and avoid pretending the past is simply waiting unchanged in the present. Afternoon drifts by, the clouds thin, light flickers through leaves and moves across the ground in patches. Someone hums while working. The tune is low and repetitive, barely more than breath. Perhaps it soothes the worker. Perhaps it soothes the child nearby. Perhaps it is not a tune at all, but your modern mind searching for music in ancient sound. You sit again near the small fire. The camp feels neither primitive nor romantic. It feels lived in. Ash under fingernails, sore backs, warm food, tools always needing attention, children always needing watching, laughter arriving unexpectedly, quiet grief perhaps held somewhere just out of sight, comfort made from effort. And as evening approaches, you understand that the hidden lives beyond the camps are not lesser history. They are history's softest fabric. The grand questions of evolution depend on these ordinary hours, because minds do not evolve in empty space. They grow around fires, in arms, in voices, in routines, in the repeated work of keeping one another alive. The light fades. Smoke rises straight into the cooling air. Someone folds a hide. Someone sets a tool within reach for morning. The child sleeps again, cheek pressed against a worn piece of fur. The camp becomes quiet, but not empty. It is full of invisible traces, care, habit, memory, and all the small things that time rarely keeps, but life could never do without. You leave the quiet camp at dusk, carrying with you the softer traces of life that rarely survive the knot of cord. The sleeping child, the low hum near the fire. The path ahead climbs gently through dry grass and broken stone. Evening light gathers along the edges of the hills, turning them purple and grey. The air cools quickly, and the first stars begin to show themselves above the darkening ridge. Somewhere beyond this landscape, beyond the reach of the small group you have followed, other human relatives are living their own final chapters. Neanderthals in parts of Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans somewhere across Asia, their full range still shadowy. Perhaps other late human groups in island forests, mountain valleys, or places the record has barely touched. They are not symbols. They are not failed experiments waiting politely to disappear. They are people of their own worlds, shaped by long histories, familiar landscapes, and skills refined across thousands of generations. This section brings you to one of the most haunting mysteries in human evolution. Why did they vanish while Homo sapiens endured? The background is not simple. Around the period after Homo sapiens began moving more widely beyond Africa, the world was changing in many ways. Climates shifted, habitats moved, populations expanded, contracted, and met one another. Neanderthals had already survived difficult Ice Age conditions for a very long time. They knew cold landscapes deeply. They made tools, used fire, hunted, cared for members of their groups, and occupied caves, rock shelters, and open sites across wide regions. Denisovans, though less visible in fossils, left genetic traces across later populations and must have had their own adaptive strengths. So the question is not, why did advanced humans replace simple ones? That old story is too small, and frankly a little rude to the dead. A careful reading of the evidence shows that Neanderthals disappeared roughly 40,000 years ago, though the timing varies by region and remains debated. Homo sapiens overlapped with them in parts of Eurasia for thousands of years. This means there was time for contact, competition, exchange, interbreeding, and perhaps long periods of mutual avoidance. Disappearance was not a single scene. It was a slow dimming of many fires. You walk through a narrow pass where the wind moves with a hollow sound. The stone walls on either side hold the day's warmth for a little while, but shadow is already taking it back. You imagine a Neanderthal group moving through a similar place, broad hands carrying tools, children wrapped against cold, someone scanning for ibex or deer along the slope. Their bodies are so powerful, act, adapted to demanding conditions. Their world is not easy, but it is known. One strange and touching detail from Neanderthal archaeology is that some individuals survived serious injuries, dental problems, or physical limitations for years, which suggests that others helped feed or protect them. In a harsh environment, survival after such injuries implies care. It is a quiet reminder that vanished does not mean lesser, it means lost. You pause near a shallow cave mouth. Inside, the air is cooler and smells faintly of dust, stone, and old animal presence. A few dry leaves have blown against the wall. If people had used this shelter, they might have left ash, bones, stone flakes, and dark stains from fires. To an archaeologist, such traces would be precious. To the people who made them, they were simply the remains of a night's warmth. The question of why Neanderthals vanished remains unsettled. Some researchers emphasize climate instability. As environments shifted, forests and grasslands changed, affecting the animals Neanderthals hunted and the routes they knew. Others point to small population sizes. If groups were scattered and few, they would be vulnerable to bad seasons, illness, low birth rates, and simple chance. A group does not need to be defeated dramatically to vanish. It can dwindle quietly, one hard winter at a time. Another line of thought focuses on competition with Homo sapiens. Perhaps incoming groups had wider social networks, more flexible tools, broader diets, or symbolic systems that help them coordinate across larger distances, even a slight advantage. Repeated over many generations can matter. Not a heroic victory, but a slow difference in resilience. Still others point to interbreeding. Some Neanderthal populations may not have vanished in a clean sense. Part of their ancestry continued inside Homo sapiens. Their fires went out as separate communities, but traces of them remained in descendants. The end of a population can be both disappearance and merging, which is emotionally confusing, but deep history often is. You step deeper into the cave. The sound of the wind fades behind you. Darkness gathers at the back, soft and cool. You can almost imagine voices here. Not your group's voices, but others. Lower perhaps, shaped by another language or another rhythm. Someone placing wood on a hearth, someone scraping a hide, someone comforting a child. Someone watching the entrance as snow or rain moves beyond it. It is tempting to make the story dramatic. Homo sapiens arrive. Neanderthals vanish. Progress marches forward wearing very confident boots. But real history does not need such tidy theatre. The more evidence appears, the more the picture becomes layered. Neanderthals were capable. Homo sapiens were capable. The environment was unstable. Populations were fragile. Encounters were varied. Luck mattered. Timing mattered. Geography mattered. Perhaps in some valleys, Homo sapiens learned from Neanderthals. Perhaps in others, they competed. Perhaps in others, they barely met. A lesser-known point is that the final Neanderthal populations may have survived in small refuges, including parts of southern Europe. Longer than in other regions, these possible late survival zones are debated, but they remind you that extinction is rarely evenly spread. It is patchy. One valley may be empty while another still holds voices. One cave may go cold while another fire burns on for generations. Outside the cave, night has nearly arrived. You return to the entrance and look across the darkening land. The sky is deep blue now, with stars sharpening one by one. The first wind of night slips over the ridge and touches your face. It smells of stone, dry grass, and distant cold. You think of Denisovans, even more mysterious. Their fossils are few, but their genetic legacy is real. They may have lived across enormous regions, perhaps in environments as different as Siberian caves, Asian mountains, and tropical islands, though the details are still emerging. How did their communities end? Did they merge into expanding Homo sapiens groups? Did climate isolation or competition reduce them? The evidence is not yet enough to tell the full story, and maybe that uncertainty is appropriate. A vanished people should not be reduced to a single explanation just because modern minds like clean endings. Their disappearance was made of many small human realities' births that did not happen. Paths no longer walked, shelters no longer used, songs no longer taught, tools no longer shaped in the same way. You walk back down toward your own group's fire, now glowing faintly in the distance. Around it, Homo sapiens sleep and murmur, unaware that their descendants will one day ask why they endured when others did not. They are not thinking of destiny. They are thinking of warmth, food, children, sore feet, tomorrow's route, and perhaps the strange smoke seen beyond a ridge. The mystery of vanishing rivals is not only about loss, it is about humility. Survival does not always mean superiority. Sometimes it means timing, sometimes it means numbers, sometimes it means luck moving quietly through generations. Sometimes it means becoming part of another story. The night settles. Two old human worlds seem to overlap in your imagination, one fading, one continuing, both fragile beneath the stars. You stand between them for a moment, listening to the wind, and the silence feels full of lives that almost reached us, but not quite. You return toward the camp with the night wrapped close around you, and the question of vanished relatives follows like a quiet shadow. The fire ahead glows low in the hollow, a warm red pulse beneath the dark. Bodies sleep under hides. A watcher sits near the edge of the circle, knees drawn up, eyes open to the black line of shrubs beyond the light. The air smells of ash, cold grass, and animal hymn, with a faint sweetness from roots buried earlier near the coals. Nothing here looks like destiny. That is one of the strangest things about standing inside deep time, from far away. Modern people speak of human evolution as if it had direction, as if every step led neatly to cities, books, music, satellites, and someone eating cereal at midnight while watching history videos. But here, among the sleeping bodies, there is no guarantee. There is only another night survived. This part of the journey turns toward genes, luck, and survival. Not genes as something cold and abstract, but as tiny instructions carried invisibly inside every body near the fire. No one here knows about DNA. No one can see inheritance as spirals or sequences. Yet inheritance is present in every child's face, every strong grip, every immune response, every adaptation to sunlight, diet. Altitude, disease, or cold, it is hidden, but it is always travelling. The broad setting is a world of small groups spread across large landscapes. Population sizes are often limited. Some bands may be isolated for long periods, while others maintain wider ties through movement. Exchange and partnership in such conditions, chance matters enormously. A storm, a failed hunt, an illness, a lucky meeting at a water source, a child born during a season of plenty, all these can ripple through generations. By this period, Homo sapiens had already inherited a long evolutionary history within Africa, and as some groups moved beyond Africa, they carried only part of that genetic diversity with them. Later populations would be shaped by founder effects, mixing with other human groups, adaptation to local environments, and ordinary randomness. That plain statement carries a whole universe inside it. The people leaving one region do not carry every variation present in the larger population. They carry what they carry, like travellers with bundles packed by both need and accident. You sit near the fire and look at the sleeping faces. A child has one hand tucked beneath their chin. An adult's scar catches the ember light. Someone breathes softly through a blocked nose. These bodies are records, but not perfect records. A trait that helps in one place may be useless in another. A variation that survives may do so because it is useful, or because it travelled with a small group that happened to endure. Evolution is not always a brilliant engineer. Sometimes it is a sleepy tinkerer working with spare parts. One of the more curious pieces of evidence from ancient DNA is that small populations can lose genetic diversity simply through chance. This process, known as genetic drift, becomes especially powerful when groups are small or isolated. No dramatic event is required. Over time, some variations become common, others vanish, and the future quietly changes shape. It is a reminder that history is not made only by great pressures. Sometimes it is made by who happens to have children, who happens to meet whom, and who happens to survive a difficult winter. The watcher near the edge of camp shifts position. A branch cracks somewhere beyond the firelight. Everyone remains asleep except the watcher, who listens. The sound does not repeat. Perhaps it was an animal, perhaps only wood cooling in the night. After a while, the watcher relaxes, though not fully, in this world. Attention is also inheritance, taught by those who lived long enough to understand what sounds matter. You imagine another kind of inheritance moving through this group, not genetic, but cultural. The way to bind a point, the route across the river, the memory of strangers beyond the ridge, a song or rhythm that helps people work, a rule about sharing. Genetic survival and cultural survival are tangled together. A child lives because someone feeds them. Someone feeds them because social bonds matter. Those bonds are shaped by learning, trust, and perhaps the very capacities that evolution has built into human minds. Scientists still examine how much specific genetic changes contributed to the behavioural shifts seen in this broad era. Some have looked at genes involved in brain development, speech, immunity, and metabolism, but simple answers remain elusive. No single human genius gene suddenly appears and explains everything, which is inconvenient for headline writers, but probably good for truth. Human abilities arise from many genes interacting with bodies, culture, environment, and experience. You look down at your own hands again. Hands descended from countless survivals. They hold no visible map of the ancient journey. Yet inside your cells are traces of older migrations and mixtures. Some people today carry small amounts of Neanderthal DNA. Some carry Denisovan ancestry. Some genetic variants shaped by ancient environments still affect bodies in subtle ways, not as mystical destiny, not as a neat identity label, but as biology carrying memory without words. A faint breeze enters the hollow. The ashes brighten, then darken. Someone mutters in sleep and turns over. The hide beneath them gives a soft, leathery creak. The camp feels fragile, but also persistent. Fragility and persistence often travel together. Consider immunity. Ancient people met new environments, new foods, new parasites, and other human groups. Immune-related genes were under pressure because disease can shape populations as surely as hunger or cold. Some inherited variants from Neanderthals and Denisovans may have affected immune responses in later Homo sapiens populations. That is one reason ancient interbreeding matters. It was not only a family secret written in the genome. It may have helped some descendants respond to local challenges, although the effects vary and can be complicated. Another quiet detail is that adaptations can come with trade-offs. A genetic variant useful in one environment may carry costs in another. A strong immune response might help fight infection, but also increase risk of inflammation. A body is not designed for perfect happiness. It is negotiated through circumstance. Anyone with a backache can probably confirm that evolution does not issue luxury models. The fire sinks lower. You listen to the breathing of the camp and think about luck. We often use that word lightly, but in deep time it becomes enormous. A small group chooses one valley instead of another. Rain falls, a child survives fever, a stranger is welcome rather than avoided. A tool-making lesson is remembered. A root opens during a wet phase, a birth happens at the right season. Across thousands of years, these little accidents become ancestry. Debate continues over whether Homo sapiens survived because of sharper cultural flexibility, larger networks, demographic advantages, environmental luck, genetic adaptations, or some shifting mixture of all these. The most careful answer may be the least dramatic one: many forces acted together. Evolution does not owe us a single cause. It prefers braids. Just before dawn, the watcher adds a small branch to the fire. It catches slowly, curling into flame. Warm light returns to the nearest faces. A child opens their eyes for a moment, sees the familiar circle, and sleeps again. You feel the tenderness of that moment. Survival is not an abstract victory. It is waking under the same sky because someone kept watch, because the body held, because the group stayed together, because chance did not turn away. Genes carried possibilities, culture carried knowledge, luck opened and closed doors, and as the first grey light gathers over the hollow, you understand that human destiny was never guaranteed. It was woven from countless small survivals, each one quiet enough to disappear, yet strong enough to reach you here, breathing in the dark, still carrying the ancient thread. Dawn settles slowly over the hollow, not bright all at once, but in layers. First the sky loosens from black into deep blue. Then the grass begins to separate from the shadows. Then the faces around the fire appear again, soft and tired, touched with pale light. Someone coughs, someone stretches a stiff shoulder. A child blinks at the morning with the mild disappointment of anyone who is enjoying sleep and has been unfairly returned to reality. You remain beside the fading fire, thinking about the thread of inheritance that carried through the night. Genes, chance, care, and memory. They do not stay trapped in the ancient world. They travel forward. They move through bodies, habits, fears, appetites, senses, and small instincts that modern people often do not notice. This part of the journey brings you closer to yourself, because the deep past is not only behind you, it is inside you, quiet as breath. The group begins its morning routine, ashes stirred. A few coals are saved, food is checked. Someone rubs sleep from their eyes with fingers stained faintly by pigment. Hides are shaken out, and the smell of smoke rises from them in soft grey puffs. The air is cold enough that everyone stays near the fire longer than they might admit, even ancient humans, hardy as they were. Hardy as a pizza. Probably appreciated not being cold every minute of the day. Endurance is admirable, but warmth is better. The world these people live in has shaped bodies for countless generations. Their senses are trained by necessity. They notice movement at the edge of vision. They hear changes in bird calls. They smell rain, smoke, rot, animals, and damp earth. They feel weather in their skin. Their bodies store adaptations from earlier ancestors. And their lives continue shaping which traits matter. Over time, some inherited patterns will help descendants survive in new places. Others will fade. Others will remain. Oddly mismatched to future worlds full of chairs, sugar, screens, and very little mammoth chasing. A firm piece of biological history is that many people alive today carry traces of ancient interbreeding with Neanderthals or Denisovans. Though the amount and distribution vary by population, these traces are small compared with the whole genome, but they are real. Some are linked to immune function, skin biology, altitude adaptation, and other traits, though each connection is complex and often modest. The ancient relatives you glimpsed beyond the ridge did not simply vanish from the human story. Some of their inheritance travelled onward in living bodies. You follow the group as they leave the hollow and move across a slope of dry grass. Morning sun warms your back. Dew soaks into the edges of hide footwear. The land smells fresh for a brief time before the day turns dusty. Someone pauses and lifts their head, listening. A distant crackle in the brush. A bird alarm call, a small shift in the wind. The group adjusts its path slightly without discussion. This attention feels familiar. Even if modern life rarely demands it in the same way, you may still sense when a room changes mood. You may still turn toward a sudden sound before thinking. You may feel uneasy in darkness, comforted by firelight, soothed by voices nearby. Not every modern feeling is an ancient adaptation. Of course, some are shaped by culture, experience, and personal life. But the body is old, and it carries old preferences, warmth, safety, food shared with trusted others, familiar faces in low light. The mind relaxes when the circle feels secure. One subtle inheritance from deep time may be our powerful social sensitivity. Humans are intensely tuned to other humans' expressions. Tone, posture, trust, exclusion, approval, threat. In a small ancient group, reading social signals was not a hobby. It was survival. A person who understood tension, generosity, anger, grief, or alliance could move more safely through the social world. Today, this ancient attentiveness can make us wonderfully empathetic, or make us lie awake replaying one awkward conversation from 6 years ago. Evolution gives gifts, but it does not always include an off switch. The path dips toward a patch of trees. Their leaves make a soft clicking sound in the breeze. Beneath them, the ground is cooler and smells of shade. Bark, an old leaf litter. A child stops to examine something on a branch. An adult gently guides them onward. Another person points toward marks in the soil where an animal has passed. The group pauses just long enough to learn from the sign, then continues. One interesting detail from modern genetics is the Denisovan contribution to high-altitude adaptation in some Tibetan populations, especially involving variation near the EPAS1 gene, which helps with life in low-oxygen environments. It is a remarkable example of deep ancestry becoming useful in a specific setting much later. A trace from an ancient human cousin may have helped later people breathe more easily in the thin air of high mountains. That is the past not as a story in a book, but as air moving through lungs. The people you walk with do not know any of this. They know breath only as breath. Strength as strength, illness as weakness, hunger as hunger. Yet their lives are part of the chain that will one day produce these discoveries. They carry possibilities without naming them. There is still uncertainty about how to interpret many ancient genetic effects. Some inherited variants appear to have helped in certain environments, while others may contribute to modern disease risks under very different conditions. Researchers continue refining these links, because genes rarely act alone. A variant may behave differently depending on diet, climate, disease exposure, lifestyle, and other genes. The body is not a simple message from the past. It is a conversation between past and present. By midday, the group rests near a shallow pool. The water is still, reflecting leaves and pale sky. Dragonflies or small insects hover above the surface. Someone kneels to drink, cupping water carefully. Another washes dirt from a root. The smell of mud rises rich and dark. A baby fusses until given something to chew nearby. An older child practices throwing a small stick at a mark in the dust, missing several times with great seriousness. You sit by the pool and feel the strange closeness of 70,000 years. The distance is enormous, yet the body bridges it. You know tired feet, you know thirst, you know the comfort of shade, you know the sound of someone you trust moving nearby. You know how flame draws the eye, you know how darkness changes the room, even if the room is now an apartment, a bedroom, or a quiet place lit by a screen, another echo inside you may be the love of stories. Humans seem built to organize life into meaning. Who went where? What happened before? What might happen next? Who can be trusted? Why the storm came? Why the dead are remembered? Stories help groups teach, warn, comfort, and belong. In the ancient world, a story may guide people to water. In the modern world, a story may guide someone gently towards sleep. Very practical. Really, the ancestors would approve, provided the fire was managed properly. The day begins to fade again. The group rises from the pool and continues. Their shadows stretch long across the ground. Every step is ordinary. Every step is inheritance in motion. Inside these bodies are ancient adaptations, recent accidents, borrowed traces from other human relatives, and learned habits shaped by care. You walk with them in the golden light and understand that deep time is not gone. It is folded into the way humans gather. Fear, comfort, remember, and hope. The ancient world did not end completely. It became quieter. It became hidden. It became you. You continue into the long gold of evening, with the pool behind you and the soft sounds of the group moving ahead. Feet press dry grass, bundles shift against shoulders. A child hums one phrase over and over until an adult gently touches their head, perhaps asking for quiet, perhaps asking for mercy. The sun lowers toward a line of distant hills, and the shadows stretch until the whole landscape seems to be slowly folding itself away. This part of the journey turns toward what cannot be known. That may feel strange after walking through so many clues: pigments, beads, tools, hearths, genes, bones, tracks, and shelters. Each has carried you a little farther into the past. Each has opened a small window, yet every window also reminds you of the walls around it. Archaeology is powerful, but it is not magic. It can recover traces. It can measure, compare, date, analyze, and reconstruct. But much of human life vanishes without leaving durable marks. The world of 70,000 years ago is mostly unwritten because writing does not yet exist. No one leaves a diary saying the weather was irritating. The children were restless, and the neighbor group had strange but interesting tools. No one carves a full explanation of why they wore a shell bead or whether red pigment meant beauty, mourning, protection, ritual, or all of those at once. The people you walk beside live richly, but they do not know they are future evidence. The archaeological record is uneven by nature. Stone tools survive well. Burned bone may survive. Teeth sometimes survive beautifully, in the slightly rude way teeth have of outlasting almost everything else. Shell, charcoal, and mineral pigments may remain, but wood rots, fibre decays, skin disappears, feathers vanish, painted bodies leave no body paint. Spoken language dissolves the moment the breath ends. Songs, jokes, warnings, and tenderness are not easily fossilized. You reach a low rock shelter as evening deepens. The group may stop here for the night, or perhaps only rest before continuing. The shelter faces away from the wind. Its floor is dusty, marked by old animal tracks and scattered leaves. The stone overhead holds a coolness that the day has not warmed away. Someone tests the ground with a foot. Someone else looks toward the slope below. Checking visibility. It is a practical place, dry enough, sheltered enough, close enough to wood. If archaeologists returned here far in the future, what might they find? Perhaps charcoal from a hearth, a few flakes from repaired tools, a burned seed, if luck were unusually kind, a broken bone, a stain in the soil. From that, they might infer fire use, food processing, tool maintenance, perhaps season of occupation. They might write carefully about activity areas and material remains. They might be right about many things. But they would not find the argument that happened because someone misplaced a scraper. They would not find the exact tone of the lullaby. They would not find whether the person sitting at the back of the shelter was grieving, bored, amused, jealous, or quietly relieved to be out of the wind. They would not find who was considered funny. And truly, a whole civilization can be judged by who everyone thinks is funny. One small but revealing detail from archaeology is that cave and shelter sites are overrepresented in our understanding of deep prehistory because they preserve materials better than many open-air camps. This can distort our picture. People did not live only in caves, despite what cartoons have worked very hard to suggest. Many activities took place in open landscapes, under trees, near rivers, on coasts, and in temporary camps that left faint traces or none at all. A fire is built near the shelter mouth. Dry twigs catch quickly. Smoke curls upward, then drifts along the rock ceiling before escaping into the evening. The smell fills the shallow space: ash, resin, dry wood, and the warm scent of bodies settling. People sit close. Tools are placed near hands. Food is unpacked. The day's walking leaves a heaviness in everyone's movements. You sit beside the wall and watch firelight flicker across the stone. It would be easy to imagine markings here. Animals drawn in red or black. Handprints, lines, dots. Signs whose meaning has fallen out of reach. But perhaps there are none. Perhaps this group marks stories on skin, wood, fibre, or memory. Perhaps their symbols are sung, danced, worn, or spoken, and therefore gone. This is one of the great challenges in understanding human evolution. Absence can mean many things. It may mean people did not make something. It may mean they made it from materials that decayed. It may mean archaeologists have not found the right site. It may mean the evidence was destroyed by water, time, animals, erosion, or later humans. Silence in the record is not always silence in life. Researchers differ in how they interpret gaps like these. Some prefer cautious conclusions, accepting only what material evidence clearly supports. Others use comparison, experimental archaeology, genetics, and studies of living societies to imagine broader possibilities. Both approaches have value. Too much caution can make the past seem emptier than it was. Too much imagination can make it too neat, too colourful, too modern. The careful path lies somewhere between, with humility as a walking stick. The fire pops softly. A child startles, then laughs when nothing happens. An adult smiles into the flames. The shelter grows warmer. Outside, the sky has turned deep blue. With a pale moon lifting over the ridge, the wind touches the grass below, making it ripple like dark water. You think of all the missing evidence. Baby slings made from hide, baskets woven from reeds, nets, traps, cords, mats, wooden bowls, digging sticks, painted faces, ornaments made from feathers, stories attached to stars, names for places, names for people, names for the dead. The ancient world may have been full of materials and meanings that time simply refused to keep. And yet, what remains is astonishing. A stone tool can show planning. A hearth can show gathering. A bead can suggest identity. A healed bone can suggest care. DNA can reveal meetings no one recorded. Sediment can preserve pollen from vanished plants. A cave floor can become a quiet archive of breath, hunger, cold, and fire. One fascinating method used today is microscopic residue analysis, where researchers examine tiny traces left on tools, such as plant fibers, animal tissue, or mineral residues. These traces can reveal how objects were used. A stone edge may look silent to the naked eye, but under magnification it can whisper of hide scraping, woodworking, or plant processing. The past does not always speak loudly. Sometimes it requires a very good microscope and a lot of patience. The group begins to settle for the night. Someone at the shelter entrance watches the slope below. Another person tucks food deeper inside a hide bag. A child curls against an adult's side. The firelight trembles over tired faces. You hear breathing, shifting, the occasional murmur, the dry scratch of someone adjusting a sleeping place. You realise that archaeology cannot reveal everything because no science can fully recover a lived moment. It can bring you close, wonderfully close, but not all the way. It can show that people were here. It can suggest what they did. It can narrow possibilities. It can overturn old assumptions, but it cannot return every voice. And perhaps that is why this journey feels so quiet. You are walking not only through evidence, but through absence. The missing pieces are not failures, they are reminders that these people were not made for us to study. They were alive for themselves. Outside the shelter, the moon brightens, the fire lowers. Smoke thins into the cool night. You rest against the stone wall, feeling its chill through your back, and let the uncertainty settle gently rather than sharply. There is comfort in not knowing everything. The past keeps some of its softness, some of its privacy, some of its dark, and in that darkness, the ancient people sleep, surrounded by traces that may survive and countless moments that will not. The record is incomplete, but the life was whole. You wake in the rock shelter before sunrise, while the world is still shaped mostly by shadow. The fire has gone low again, and its last heat rests beneath a soft blanket of ash. Around you, people sleep in quiet curves beneath hides and woven coverings that time will almost certainly refuse to preserve. The stone wall against your back is cold, the air smells of smoke dust, old leaves, and the faint sour warmth of many bodies sheltering through the night. For a while, nothing happens, and that feels right. Because the greatest mysteries of human evolution do not always arrive as thunder. They wait in homes. They sit inside ordinary mornings. They hide in the gap between a stone tool and the hand that made it, between a bead and the feeling it carried, between a gene and the ancient meeting that placed it there. After all your walking, after the fires, rivers, ridges, children, tools, and vanished cousins, the questions remain. This part of the journey gathers those questions gently, not to solve them all, but to listen to them more clearly. The background is a world in motion. Homo sapiens are spreading, adapting, meeting other human groups, and living through unstable climates. Some communities remain close to familiar territories, others push across new landscapes. Technologies vary. Symbolic objects appear in some places and not others. Genetic traces show contact where bones are scarce. Archaeological sites offer flashes of behaviour, but the flashes do not form a complete lantern. A central question remains: did something truly change in the human mind around this broad period? Or are modern observers seeing a pattern created by preservation, population growth, and discovery? Perhaps the abilities were already present much earlier, but they became easier to see when more people, more materials, and more sites entered the record. Perhaps a subtle shift in communication allowed ideas to travel faster and survive longer. Perhaps harsh climates forced flexible thinking into sharper use. Perhaps all of this is true at once, which is less dramatic, but usually how reality behaves. The first sleepers begin to stir. Someone rubs ash from a forearm, a child wakes, looks offended by consciousness, and buries their face back into a hide. Outside the shelter, pale light begins to separate the grasses from the ground. A bird calls from somewhere down the slope. Then another answers. One solid piece of the scientific picture is that there is no single artifact or fossil that explains the whole transformation. No magic tool, no single skull, no one bead, no tidy ancient receipt saying humanity became modern today. Instead, researchers compare many lines of evidence, stone technology, ornaments, pigments, burials, migration patterns, climate records, ancient DNA, and signs of social exchange. The mystery is not a locked box with one key. It is more like a landscape with many paths. You step outside the shelter. The air is colder in the open. Dew clings to grass, darkening the hem of your imagined covering. The sky is pale near the horizon and still blue-black overhead. From here, you can see the valley below, the line of the river, the faint shape of the ridge where two human fires once glowed in your memory. Everything looks calm, but the calm holds many unanswered things. Why did Homo sapiens expand so widely when other human groups faded? Was it language? Was it social networking before the term became exhausting? Was it population size, symbolic identity, broader diets, better long-distance cooperation, environmental timing, or simple luck repeated across generations? Each answer explains something, but none explains everything. A curious detail that complicates the story is that some early evidence for symbolic behavior appears well before 70,000 years ago, including shell beads and pigment use in regions of Africa and the Near East. That means the famous sudden revolution idea may be too abrupt. Human creativity may have had deep roots, appearing, fading, and reappearing as populations change and conditions allowed. Innovation is not always a straight staircase. Sometimes it is the lantern carried through the wind, bright in one place, dim in another, then bright again. The group begins preparing to leave the shelter. The morning routine unfolds, embers checked, bundles tied, tools counted, children gathered, food divided. These familiar actions are soothing now. You've seen them before, and the repetition feels like a kind of ancient music. A cord is tightened, a hide is folded, a stone flake is slipped into a pouch. A baby is lifted against a shoulder and quiets at once. In this ordinary movement, you sense another unanswered question: how much of the human story belongs to invention, and how much belongs to preservation? Inventing a new tool matters, but teaching it may matter more. Imagining a symbol matters, but making others understand it may matter more. Finding a route matters, but remembering it across generations may matter most of all. Those who study the period often disagree less about whether early humans were capable and more about how to explain the unevenness of the record. Some regions show rich evidence of symbolic life, others seem quieter. Is that because people behave differently, or because the evidence was lost? Did smaller groups lose innovations when individuals died? Did larger networks protect knowledge from disappearing? These are not small details. They shape the whole story. You follow this group down from the shelter as the sunlight begins to touch the stones. The path is narrow and dusty. A bush releases a sharp scent when someone brushes against it. Pebbles shift beneath feet. Below, the valley brightens slowly, revealing animal tracks near the water and a patch of reeds bending in the breeze. The human mind, you realize, is difficult to study because it lives partly outside the skull. It lives in tools, yes, but also in relationships. It lives in the way one person watches another shape stone. It lives in shared attention towards tracks in mud. It lives in a story that tells children where to find water. It lives in ornaments that mark belonging, and in rituals that may never leave a trace, do you see? The brain is inside the body, but culture is between bodies. Modern comparisons can help a little. Today, one idea can travel across the world in seconds, although sadly so can a very bad opinion. In the ancient world, ideas travelled by walking, meeting, marrying, trading, watching, copying, and remembering. Slow does not mean weak. A technique that moved from group to group could reshape survival. A story carried along seasonal routes could become a map. A bead style could signal friendship before words were exchanged. Another difficult question concerns the inner lives of the people themselves. Did they think of dreams as messages? Did they mark the dead with ritual? Did they divide the world into visible and invisible beings? Did they understand certain animals as kin, rivals, teachers, or spirits? The evidence gives hints in later periods, and sometimes earlier ones, but certainty slips away. The past protects its private meanings. By late morning, the group reaches the river again, sunlight sparkles on the moving water. Someone kneels to drink. Another washes ash from their hands. The water is cold and bright against the skin. The sound of it is steady, almost sleepy, repeating itself over stones. You stand at the bank and let the questions gather, without forcing them into answers. What changed around 70,000 years ago? Perhaps not one thing. Perhaps a convergence climate pressure, migration, social networks, symbolic thought, language, demographic growth, interbreeding, chance, and memory. A woven cord is stronger than a single fibre. Maybe human success was like that. The group crosses slowly. The water reaches ankles, then shins. A child complains softly and is lifted across the coldest part, on the far bank. Everyone pauses to regroup. No one knows they are walking through a mystery. They are simply walking through a day. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth of all. The questions that refuse to fade are not distant from life. They are made of life. A tool in the hand, a word in the dark, a child learning a plant, a stranger beyond the ridge, a bead carried across miles, a fire kept alive until morning. You continue with them into the widening light, and the unanswered questions do not feel empty anymore. They feel like stars fading at dawn, still present, only hidden by brightness. They remain above the human story, patient and quiet, inviting each generation to look again. You walk on after the river crossing, and the light becomes gentle again. Morning has opened into a calm, pale day, with clouds drifting high above the land and the sun warming the stones just enough to release the faint smell of dust. The group moves at an easy pace now. No one speaks much. The rhythm of feet, breath, and shifting bundles has become familiar to you, almost like a quiet song heard through sleep. Ahead, the landscape rises toward a long ridge. Beyond it, you sense the path of your journey beginning to turn homeward. Though home is a strange word here, you have moved through a world before houses, before writing, before named kingdoms, before maps, before clocks, before any human being could imagine the full length of the story they were living inside. And yet, after all this time, the people beside you no longer feel remote. They feel close in the way firelight feels close, not because it explains everything, but because it warms what it touches. This final section brings you through the last stretch of deep time, carrying the questions with you, rather than trying to lock them away. Around 70,000 years ago, or within that broad and uneven window, something in the human story becomes especially compelling. Humans move farther. Their tools show planning and skill. Ornaments and pigments hint at identity and meaning. Social networks may grow stronger. Encounters with other human relatives leave genetic traces. Climate shifts open and close roots. Small groups endure because they share knowledge. Care for children, watch the dark, and remember the land. None of this is simple. That may be the most honest lesson. The group climbs the ridge slowly. The ground is rough beneath your feet, with loose stones that slide if stepped on carelessly. A dry wind moves over the slope, carrying the smell of grass and distant water. Someone pauses to adjust a bundle. A child reaches for an adult's hand. The adult takes it without looking down, as if the gesture has been repeated so often that it has become part of walking. One thing science has made clear is that modern humans did not emerge from nowhere, fully formed in a single dramatic moment. Our species developed over a long span in Africa, and later populations spread, mixed, adapted, and changed across many regions. The story is braided from biology and culture, from inheritance and invention, from environment and accident. There is no clean line where the ancient mind ends and the modern one begins. There are only traces becoming more visible, then more numerous, then familiar enough that you start to recognize yourself. At the top of the ridge, the group stops to rest. The view opens wide. Below lies the river, shining in a pale curve. Beyond it are the hollows where fires burned, the stone outcrop where tools were shaped, the valley where roots were dug, the ridge where another human cousin's smoke once drifted into the night. In your memory, all those places glow softly now, like embers scattered across a dark landscape. A small detail returns to you: the bead by the fire, turned between fingers, rubbed with pigment. Such an object might seem almost nothing beside the great sweep of evolution. But perhaps that is why it matters. A tiny shell can hold distance, memory, belonging, and care. A small ornament can say what a person cannot say with survival alone. Humans are creatures who make meaning portable. The unanswered questions remain open among scientists. Was there a sudden cognitive change? Was language the key? Did climate instability push innovation forward? Did wider social networks allow ideas to survive? Did population growth make culture more cumulative? Did interbreeding with other human groups help some communities adapt? Did luck decide more than anyone wants to admit? The careful answer is that many forces likely work together. Human evolution is not a single door opening. It is more like a night camp slowly brightening toward dawn. First a coal, then a breath, then a thread of smoke, then a small flame, then faces appearing in warm light. You sit on the ridge and watch the group rest. Someone cracks a seed with a stone. Someone drinks from a skin. 2 children draw lines in dust with sticks, then wipe them away and begin again. An older person looks across the valley for a long time. Perhaps they're reading weather, perhaps remembering another journey, perhaps simply resting their eyes. Deep history does not explain every silence, and that is part of its dignity. Modern life makes it easy to forget how much had to happen before you could exist. Not in a grand, self-important way, more in the humble sense that countless ordinary survivals had to continue. Someone had to find water, someone had to teach the child, someone had to keep the ember alive, someone had to take the hand offered on the ridge, someone had to choose a path that did not end the story. The wind softens, grass bends and rises again. A bird glides over the valley, quiet and dark against the bright sky. The people begin to stand, bundles are lifted, tools are checked. The child who drew in the dust glances back once at the marks, now already smudged by feet and wind. Then the group moves on. You follow them down the far side of the ridge, but the world around you begins to shift. The ancient light becomes thinner, dreamlike. The sounds soften footsteps fading into grass, voices becoming murmurs, the knock of tools in a bundle growing distant. The smell of smoke remains longest, clinging to the air as if it does not want to leave. You understand now that the mystery of 70,000 years ago is not only about what scientists cannot explain, it is also about what they have carefully, patiently revealed. The past was not empty. It was full of intelligence, care, uncertainty, skill, fear, beauty, and adaptation. It was full of people who did not know they were ancestors. They were simply alive. And maybe that is enough to carry with you. As the ancient path fades beneath your feet, you look once more at the small moving group. They are fragile beneath the enormous sky. But they are not helpless. They have fire. They have tools. They have memory, they have one another. They have the restless human gift of looking beyond the next hill and wondering what waits there. Their world slips farther away, but not completely. It remains in your hands, your breath, your need for warmth, your love of stories, your unease in darkness, your comfort beside familiar voices. Deep time is not a foreign country after all. It is the long road that leads quietly to this moment. You walk home through it, softly, carrying the old firelight with you. Word count 1134. The ridge behind you grows dim, and the ancient campfires become smaller and smaller, until they look almost like stars resting on the earth. The people you followed continue along their path, not hurried, not aware of your watching, wrapped in the ordinary grace of another day survived. You let the scene soften. The river becomes a silver thread, the grass becomes a dark, gentle sea, the smoke from the hearth rises once more, thin and blue, then disappears into the evening air. Somewhere, a child sleeps against a warm shoulder. Somewhere, a tool is placed carefully within reach. Somewhere, a watcher listens to the night and finds it quiet enough. And now the great questions can rest too. They do not need to be answered tonight. The mystery of the human mind, the journeys across ancient landscapes, the vanished cousins, the tiny beads and red pigments and silent bones, all of it can settle like ash after a fire. Some truths remain hidden, some clues wait in stone, some stories are gone forever, but the lives themselves were real, and the long chain of survival reached farther than anyone around those fires could have imagined. So breathe slowly, feel the room around you, feel the softness beneath you. The deep past is no longer far away. It has become a quiet shoreline, a fading path, a warm ember cupped against the dark. Outside the old shelter, the stars brighten. The wind lowers its voice. The last glow of the fire sinks into red, then gold, then a soft grey hush. Nothing is lost in this moment. Nothing needs to be chased. You're safe here, at the edge of sleep, with the ancient world behind you and the gentle night ahead. Let the old footsteps fade. Let the fire grow quiet. Let the story close like eyes at the end of a long and peaceful day. Sweet dreams.